We want to see what we have learned from the past 5 years that will help us to inform, particularly the implementation and execution of this particular strategic plan. I start off by putting the university in context, because certainly we tend to work in university, but we don't know what the University of the West Indies as a total is involved, what it looks like, what is, and so forth and so on. So in context, we're saying therefore that it is a large university by any standards, so certainly by international standards, about 47,000 students. We have over 8,000 employees. Now that covers both academic, non-academic staff, and so forth. We spend over a $500 million US, and that's the total expenditure. And we have graduates of up to 9,000 graduates per year. The Vice Chancellor in a recent presentation indicated that we have, in terms of total alumni, total graduates at the university, we're talking about up in the 10,000s of graduates over the years. So we have a large group of persons to work with. We are a transnational entity, 16 countries with 4 campuses. So what we have is a very complex organization, especially when we're now talking about covering a wide range of countries, dealing with a large number of students, and sometimes we tend to lose track. I've always said that the Vice Chancellor has to see this, or must understand therefore that this is what he's working with. It's not a small entity, but it's a massive entity that you have to coordinate, and that coordination across space, across people, across committees is not an easy exercise. And therefore all of us who are Pro-Vice Chancellors and registrars and so forth have to deal with this particular entity going forward. So I just put that to give you a sense of what we have to work with and what you are part of, and not just a small campus, but it's a massive entity that we're dealing with. And in terms of the UWI's mission, essentially, is to meet the regional human resource and development needs. We're always constantly being told that we need to be much more out there solving the problems of the region, providing the human resource base. And some of you who would have heard the discussion yesterday on CXC on brass stats will understand, therefore, that the task that we have at university is not a simple task, but certainly a major one. And more particularly, we have to, as a University of the West Indies, we have to establish some global presence as an intellectual force. I say to people, and the Vice Chancellor even himself did not recognize this. I said to him the other day that, look, Vice Chancellor, you know something, the UWI, the first degree, the BA, BSc degrees from the University of the West Indies can get you into any university in the world. Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, and so forth. And many of you have been there yourself. And I said to him, well, you know, we don't necessarily have to relate to the Caribbean alone. We can have a situation where we can market our UWI degrees in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, in England, wherever. Because if you get a first degree from UWI, you can get back into the universities which you think that might be the problem. So you get this first degree from UWI, and you can be American or Canadian, come down here, do a first degree in biology, in chemistry, and whatever, in literature, and go back up to the United States and get into Harvard, get into Stanford, any of those universities. But we have never recognized that point. We have always limited ourselves just to the Caribbean, because certainly we are a University of the West Indies and feel that our space. But the world is changing. And therefore, as the world changes, we have to recognize, therefore, that we have to be very global in our outlook, global in what we do, and I had certainly to have the sort of high standards that we presented. So therefore, we need to establish a presence in the global arena at the intellectual force. We don't, unfortunately, see it that way as yet. But we want to certainly, in this strategic plan, start building it much stronger going forward. And you'll see when we come to the Mission University what we're talking about. So the education environment that we are currently operating within is certainly one that is characterized by a high degree of competition, not only regionally but internationally from other education institutions. Rapid change in technology, despite the fact we had a little glip just now, you know, this technology is changing, but we're now broadcasting these things live now. So, you know, the presentations that we're going to have over the next 2 days will certainly can be sent off to a wider group of persons. There will be a growing demand for higher education in all its dimensions. There are some people who want university education. There's some who want technical vocational education. And even now, in terms of University of the West Indies, there's a strong push in the OECS. And one of the issues that I'll be discussing in another hour or so deals with certainly the whole question of how do we provide for the education demands for persons in the UE12, what it used to be the UE12, UE12 plus 1. There's always the whole question of pressing demand for relevance and impact. And of course, we are operating in a very volatile environment. We're all waiting for tomorrow afternoon when the Minister of Finance announces the budget to find out what is happening. Certainly, one is arguing, well, it is an election year, on the one hand, so you need the goodies, and we economists talk about political budget cycles. But on the other hand, he has a fiscal constraint. He can only go so far. So clearly, he is between a rock and a hard place. So inevitably, therefore, what we have is that the University of the West Indies has to operate in what we call a new normal environment. That is, we have to see ourselves, not limiting ourselves to the little rocks that we have here, but seeing ourselves in a much broader environment into which to operate. So how do we respond? That is, how do we respond to this new environment? And essentially, here we want to utilize our intellectual capital. And I here define intellectual capital in a broader dimension. We think the intellectual capital is just human, but certainly is much more than that. It's organizational capital that you have, is the customers, it's students and staff, and all the persons involved in a broader perspective. You have to harness this particular intellectual capital in an efficient manner to do three things. One, we have to deliver accredited quality programs at reasonable costs. That's important, and that's why we have built up over the years our quality assurance systems, and secondly, why we are now moving very fast, and hopefully by the end of this, certainly by the end of the calendar year, we would have been accredited across as a major university across the region. And we have to control our costs. That's important because everyone is talking about keeping costs down. If you look in today's paper, for example, you see where the KFIS School of Business is now offering its programs at a reduced tuition cost because no one can afford some of the costs there. And this competition that's forcing them down. Secondly, we have to generate impactful cutting-edge research and innovative outputs to advance the development of the region. It's important. We have to make sure that our research work is at the highest order. And of course, most importantly, we have to achieve operational excellence in terms of quick response. You hear in most of the surveys that we've done, you hear the constant cry that the university is not responsive, whether it's in terms of applications, whether it's in terms of even assessment promotion procedures, whether it's in terms of appointments. We had just the other day a situation, Dr. Whitehead will tell you, where we delayed so long in making an appointment, the person went somewhere else and got a job. They said, well, I didn't hear from you for over a year, so you expect me to sit down and wait for a year for a position. We don't want to have that. We have to certainly enhance our operational excellence going forward. So it needs, therefore, we need as a university to continue to build capacity in terms of the gains that we've had from this current strategic plan, engage in a more strategic expansion with the resources that we have and ones that we can gather, develop creative ways to assist in the resolution of our region's challenges, and of course contribute to the global intellectual discourse. These are important things that University of West Indies will need to do coming forward. And the question is, how are we going to do these things is therefore in the context of the strategic plan going forward. So what are the strategic plan elements? Now all strategic plans usually have these six basic elements. And as you develop your strategic plans even within your department, essentially these are the elements that will come to the fore. One, you must have a mission statement. The university, I will talk about the university's mission statement in a moment, but you have a mission statement. Why it is that this particular entity exists is what you're talking about the mission statement. Two, the direction, that is what vision you have for the department. That is, as a head department, as members of the department, you want to talk about where do you see your department, where do you see the faculty, where do you see your unit going over the next 5 years or so. That's basically what we're talking about, vision. What sort of core values would inform its operations? That is what it is that we want. Operation excellence, that we want to ensure that we are good employees in terms of our employee engagement exercise. And then we have a series of goals, objectives, and initiatives that will inform what we do. And usually what you do is you undertake an analysis of your own, an internal and external analysis of your own department. Ask yourself, well, what are the main internal strengths and weaknesses of my department? And we have to be honest about that. Right? We tend to, and the problem sometimes we found in this exercise, we found ourselves saying a lot more about the weaknesses, but very few the strengths. I mean, the way you see the strategic plan as in its final form, you realize, well, originally it wasn't like that. We had a lot more weaknesses, meaning therefore we tend to be critical of ourselves much harder on ourselves than we really should. But there are a lot of strengths that we need to build on and build up over going forward. And of course, the point that I mentioned earlier about the implementation strategy, what we have found within university that we are good at, formulating things, we're good at talking through things, but when it comes to doing things, implementing, we are falling down weak on that. We need to change that whole culture, that whole dimension. And finally, the critical success factors is what we want to embed. That is what it really requires for us to get through the exercise. So let's look therefore at the mission statement of the University of the West Indies. I'm talking about University of the West Indies generally, and this is what would inform all of what we do as a university. And it says simply to advance education and create knowledge through excellence in teaching, research, innovation, public service, intellectual leadership, and outreach in order to support the inclusive development of the Caribbean region and beyond. And that goes back to that we have as a region to look at what are our core functions. Our core functions are really teaching, research, innovation to some extent, and engage in public service. Those are basic core functions of the University of the West Indies. You don't want to go too far out there. You don't want to go and selling things that we really should be selling, because that's a completely different. Those are byproducts and not relate to our core functions. And it is a slight tweak to what it is that we had developed as an original strategic plan. And I've given you the sort of mission statement in pictorial form. We start with essentially the core functions. That is we engage in our teaching, the learning, and research, innovation, advice. So those are our core things. The universities are known for these. This is what university has been set up to do. And through those core functions, they feed into the outputs of the university. That is what we produce. We produce graduates, education. We produce knowledge and ideas, or essentially this comes from our research and our advisory services. And those particular outputs have an outcomes in terms of solving some of the regional problems. The current strategic statement, mission statement, goes strictly from core functions to outcomes, before recognizing that there's an immediate output first. We don't go and solve the problems directly. We send out persons, we create ideas, and those things essentially are what really help solve the problems, make us a university in a global context. So here, therefore, we are saying then that as a university mission statement, we have our core functions, which we almost remember, our outputs, and therefore our outcomes in terms of what they finally influence and impact down the road. And that's the nature of the mission statement of the university. In terms of the vision statement, here we're talking about where do we want to be by the year 2017. And as if I can project down the road, in 2017 we will look like this. And as I say here, we want to be globally recognized as a region integrated, innovative, internationally competitive university, deeply rooted in all aspects of the Caribbean development and committed to serving the diverse needs of the people of the region and beyond. And again, we have not only a regional dimension to it, but also an international dimension. Right, that's basically what we're talking about. So everything we do in University of the West Indies now is much more focused on the international dimension than we've had in the past, and there's a major thrust abroad to focus a lot on the internationalization of the university, and I will come to that later on. So pictorially, therefore, this is what it looks like. We want to be globally recognized, and we are now in the process of developing a benchmarking and a ranking system for the university. We want to know, well, where does the University of the West Indies stand in terms of the league of universities out there? Right? We know where Harvard and Oxford and all those stand, but we don't know where University of West Indies. I wouldn't like to tell you what people say we are, but we are very, very low down in the totem pole. But we want to certainly move up in some strategic way over time. So we want to be a regionally integrated university. There's an idea abroad that the University of the West Indies is like 4 separate campuses. We want to change that particular perception and we say there is a region integrated and is a university of the University of the West Indies is what we're trying to focus on. And we therefore will want to strengthen the Vice Chancellor, so to speak, as an important coordinating element of the whole exercise to make sure that integratedness it takes place. We want to be innovative. Important, therefore, we want always to be in a situation of bringing new ideas, modifying inventions that we have, doing new things as we proceed. We want to be internationally competitive. That is, we want to be up there. As I said earlier, we want to be in a situation where a person from the United States can come and do a UW degree and feel that UW degree is as good as any university that exists in the United States, which really occupies the top of the universities in the world. And of course, we want to be deeply rooted in the Caribbean experience as a university going forward, because that's the environment within which we operate. What are the core values? The core values of the university, as indicated here, integrity, intellectual freedom, excellence, civic responsibility, accessibility, diversity, and equity. These particular core values would infuse all that we do in university. whether it is our teaching, and I'll speak to that in a moment in terms of the attributes to the graduates, in terms of our research, in terms of relationship with each other. These are the things that when you have a decision making or policy, you should be able to judge whatever the university does in terms of its policy and decision making by these core values. To say, well, that is not excellent. You did something yesterday, but I don't regard that as being excellent. But show me the excellence dimension of that. Or show me essentially the integrity in doing something. That's what you should ask yourself all the time, because we have said therefore that these are the core values. But if the university's administration or whoever does something that is not reflective in these particular core values, then something is wrong and we need to be brought back on board. In terms of the teaching and the programming aspects, the teaching and learning aspect of our operations, we have therefore the attributes of the graduates. We are saying therefore that in terms of the graduates University of West Indies, both for undergraduates and graduate students when they leave us, we want them to have a certain set of attributes. And these particular attributes will be infused in the programming that we engage. So when you develop a course, let's say in monetary economics or contract law, you ask yourself, well, does this particular program or course create a critical and creative thinker? Ask yourself that. Does it allow an effective communication process to take place? So you just ask a series of questions, and some departments have actually done. In fact, I think the one that is the engineering faculty has gone furthest down the road with this exercise, where they actually line up essentially the existing core values with their program and ask questions sequentially about everything that they've done. We want to do that. So because when we do our surveys of employers, we ask them, well, have the students been like this? And I put creative and critical and creative thinking, because we have an idea that critical sometimes has the thing of being negative. It's all bad but necessarily need the positive. But I'll go beyond the stance in a broader context of critical in both. So to ensure that we say both positive, then we put creative thinking in there. So in terms of being innovative and entrepreneurial, we have a seed program on campus. So therefore the question is, to what extent do we see our students being innovative, being entrepreneurial in what they do? Because certainly you're talking about people who are not looking for a job in somebody's place, but who can create a job going forward. So these are the sort of things you have to say. They're globally aware, they're guided by strong ethical values and so forth. So in terms of the programming of the university, of the programming of being engaging, we're asking ourselves, to what extent does the program or the course infuse these particular attributes in the student? Not all might be in one particular course, but certainly you ask yourself, have we captured these particular things? And that's important going forward. So as heads of departments, we ask that you're supposed to be guided by these particular elements in terms of the attributes. And we have added, this time around in the strategic plan, attributes of the employees. Because we recognize that we talk a lot about the human resource element is the most important in organizations and so forth, but we don't do very much. And what was, I think, very revealing when we did the first round, remember sometime earlier the Vice Chancellor and myself went around the campuses talking about the strategic plan. And what was very humbling in many respects is that there were a lot of persons who were disconnected, and that showed up in the results that we had, meaning therefore that we don't care enough about our employees as we should. So in terms of the attributes of the employees, this would inform or train development programs. We are saying therefore that we want to ensure that they have job-related knowledge and skills, they gain their critical and creative thinking, they have the responsible attitude to work-life balance. We don't want you to kill yourself in university's work, but you certainly have some health days and things of that nature, that there's some loyalty and engagement with the organization, that there's positive customer service, and this is not only internal customer, that is you're working the registry and bursary and the faculties, but you're also talking about these persons and the students. So you have situations where you would ask the bursary for a particular response, not to pick on the bursary in any way, but to something, and you got to call back 5 and 6 times, right? But when they want something from you, they want it like yesterday. So they'll recognize that you want the same thing yesterday too, from them. So we want to ensure therefore that it's positive and responsive in terms of how we do things in university, recognizing that when we turn the other cheek, that the other cheek therefore has to be the same way. And of course, to be respectful and ethical behavior as an important characteristics. So in terms of the specifics now of the plan itself, in terms of how we have laid it out, we have a very integrated framework, and the integrated framework is reflective of what we have adopted as a balanced scorecard concept. Involves a number of elements of strategic perspectives of the university's operation. That is, we have a set of operations in the university, and we want to see how these operations are linked. How is the bursary linked to the registry? How the registry is linked to the faculty? So the faculty is linked to the registry, and all sorts. All those things we want to pull together. How we have certain strategic themes in these perspectives, strategic goals, and particular objectives. And the objectives, therefore, since we are focusing on operational aspects of the plan, and a lot of tomorrow specifically, we get into more of those details. We want to look at ways in which the objectives of the university's strategic plan will be put into place by operational plans going forward. That's what it looks like schematically in diagrammatic form. That is, we have a broad area perspective, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. We have certain themes within those perspectives, certain goals within the themes, and finally we have certain job objectives, which are you're actually coming down from a very broad thing to very specific when you get into the objectives. A lot of what you're going to do tomorrow will focus a lot on the objectives, which are sometimes what the planners call SMART objectives. They're very specific, and therefore they're time bound, and so forth and so on. So the structure, integrated structure, is like that. So let's start with the perspectives, and we have 6 perspectives for the university's strategic plan. This, to a large extent, follows the sort of balanced scorecard concept. The traditional one covers 4. We thought that 6 would be better because of the nature of how we operate in the university. There's a financial perspective of the university. No money, no work. Full stop. They say no love either. So same thing in university. So we have situation, we have to look at the financial dimension of university. We have to look at the human resource element of university, the employee engagement and development. That's an important element that we want to look at. The internal operations, how we do things, how we're responsive to certain things that we do. Reporting, as I said, the whole question of dealing with assessment promotion, the appointment of person, all those things are internal operations. Or teaching, learning, and student development. And we've added student development to this one because we want to talk about this total student experience. When you come to UWI, you must feel that you've been somewhere. That you didn't go through a prison, so to speak, but you've come through somewhere that you want to sell to others. Research innovation, again, an important element. And then we've captured all the elements that are under, like in national and regional engagement, internationalization, marketing, communication, alumni engagement, under the whole outreach program. This is where the University of West Indies will reach out to the wider environment, outside or internal arrangement. So those 6 perspectives represent the nature of the strategic plan for the university, and essentially how we would relate going forward. And within those perspectives, we have certain goals and certain themes and goals. So I will quickly go through them for you. In terms of financial perspective, theme 1 is that we want to engage in some income source diversification. As you're all aware, the University of the West Indies has been funded primarily by the governments over the years, and it's becoming even problematic now trying to get money from the government. The bursary people are here, and they tell, well, I mean, you know, they have to fight almost every month to pay salaries. I mean, I suspect you're still to a bursar, Martin. You don't want to say anything that you shouldn't be saying here, right? But certainly, it is always a challenge trying to find money to pay us. To pay the PK for the people. I've now been told I've been paid of something called a center, so therefore I don't have to worry. But certainly, what we are saying here, that we want to diversify the sources of our income sources, and this is an important element going forward in the strategic plan. The second theme under financial is the recapitalization of UWI. You will see, therefore, as we build up plant, we have equipment, they're going to depreciate. They're going to wear. If you want to keep modern, you have to recapitalize. And the important thing, we have to find a source of recapitalization of the university over and above the income. And finally, we have, with the resources that we have to use them as efficiently as possible. So therefore, for example, a classic example, the university has just built a regional headquarters at Mona. And the Minister of Finance at a conference last week came in, and he was sitting down, you look at all the lights. And he said in his openings, before he said anything, before he said good morning, he said, but he was sitting down there watching, looking at the lights, and was wondering what is the energy bill of this building. Is it because here it is that you build a new building, and it had no solar systems in it. And to get the solar systems is going to cost $1.8 million US to put in a solar system in that. So you can see, therefore, in terms of efficient use of resources, is important that we need to find better ways. And I think KFL has the same basic problem of terms of energy use and so forth. So we need, therefore, to focus a lot on that. On the employee engagement and development, we have three basic themes here. Competency-based development. We want to ensure as a goal that the leadership management capabilities and the job competencies are improved throughout. So, for example, a case in point, we want to focus a lot on ensuring that heads and departments are their management and leadership skills have improved. As I said earlier, you become a head department, but you're not told how to run the department. You become a lecturer, and in the past, you're just thrown into a class and say teach, and therefore you get as bad or as good as it can be. Now we are changing that slightly, and I would expect certain things to improve. The culture of employee engagement is important. We want people to be much more engaged emotionally and otherwise within the university, and of course we want to strengthen our performance in management systems going forward as an important goal. 3, the internal operational processes. As I said earlier, we want to ensure that we have our efficient and effective academic and administrative systems in place. That is, we have situations where people want marks, when, for example, classic example is PhD orals that we find. You can submit your PhD today, you don't know when it's going to happen. And many of us who have studied overseas, you know exactly when you're going to have an oral, when you can get back, when you know what's happening and so forth. UWI seem to be falling back. It's improving slightly, but we want to tighten up to have a situation where people almost can know, well, look, tomorrow morning I'm going to have my PhD and I can go and celebrate, so to speak. So we want to ensure that our systems are efficient and effective in terms of operate, and we want to re-engineer those processes to ensure that we have standards put in place, improve the governance systems that will allow persons to be much more involved in what we do in university, and of course, as I said earlier, to strengthen the management structure of university. And we are starting from the top. We have a situation where executive management is now engaged in a leadership and management process that certainly would strengthen how we do things at senior management. And that's one of the things that we have an executive management meeting just now, as I said, and one of the issues that are on the agenda is really to look at this particular aspect. And then, of course, the whole question of the student experience. Improving academic quality, engaging students much more, and improving their experience, so that we have too many situations where students say they don't want to come back to UWI. We don't want that. And I've heard sat down in a council meeting and heard a parent say that about UWI. That they want the students say they're not coming back. No, we don't want to hear that. We want to change that particular dimension. And of course, the new frontier for the UWI will be the open and distance education. And in this particular regard, we want to focus about how we can utilize technology to ensure that we are doing, we are giving a wider berth to persons who want to access university education. Then, of course, is the research and innovation part. We want to enhance our research work. One thing I've noticed since, at this level, is that a lot of research is being done in UWI, but a lot of people don't know about it. And we need to change that, right? And it's some very innovative. When you see the external referees reports, you will not believe it. I mean, these are some senior persons who are saying something about the university. Graduate students, again, graduate student research, we want to enhance that, and of course we want to ensure that we have the funds and the facilities to ensure that this research work is on the highest order. And finally, we want the outreach part of it, national and regional engagement, to ensure that the region itself is familiar with solving the regional problems, that we engage in the international arena, that we have a global reach. That is, as I said earlier, the next frontier for UWI is being out there in the diaspora and beyond. We want to market and communicate our work and what we're doing as a UWI brand. And finally, we want to engage the alumni much more than we have in the past. We have a large alumni, but we don't utilize it as effectively. So that represents the strategic plan with the university, and this how we integrate these particular committees just now. How we integrate these different elements together. And this is the nature of what we are talking about in terms of strategic plan. That is, we have a mission and a vision statement. We want to achieve these things at the end of the planning period. And all 6 of those elements are going to feed into it, and all are related. So therefore, for example, if you have improved employee engagement, You strengthen your internal processes. You have therefore a situation where certainly students will want students have a better experience, and that better experience certainly will lead in the future to more students coming into the University of West Indies. If you foul up on one, it's going to follow up on all the others. So as a head of the department, you say therefore, look, these are 6 dimensions that we have in the University of West Indies. And you ask yourself, well, how is my department relating to these things? And how are they related within my department? So if you have a poor teaching experience, it's going to feed in certainly to a situation where people are not going to come back to do a master's degree or to do research work. So you have to make sure that it is in the highest order. So we're going to the integrated planning framework and advanced scorecard will be therefore focused in that work. I won't go through the implementation sense of this is a lot. I'll do this fairly quickly. We have, in terms of overall coordination, the executive management team headed by the Vice Chancellor would be involved, will be coordinating the exercise. We will have operational plans, and therefore the whole purpose of your work over the next today and tomorrow will be how do we develop operational plans, and John and Yolande will carry you through that. And we're going to develop in such a way we cannot take the full period because we can't see all down the road. We're going to link the operational plans to the operational budgets of universities, which are 2 years. So at the end of the day, end of this particular workshop, you should be in a position to start working on an operational plan for the first 2 years of the strategic plan. What you will be doing in your department for the first 2 years of the strategic plan, given the resources that we have and resources that you need to get. That's basically where we're going with this. That's what the plan plate that will be done. That's all that will be discussed coming forward. This is really operational in terms of the Office of Planning and Development and the campus offices assisting with the process. And this is what the organization structure will look like. You have a situation where it's going to be a bottom-up process where units, departments, and faculties will develop operational plans which should be coordinated at the faculty campus level, and then you have overall coordination at the university level. So a lot of what you're going to be doing over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, will focus a lot how do we develop operational plans at the unit, the department, and faculty levels. That will feed into a campus structure at the end of the day, and then automatically a wider set of a university-wide process. But I will just stop there. Alright, so I just want to put this up because this is essentially a lot of the focus. We develop an information system. The current plan had an information system that was very formidable. And I tell the personal story that when I was director of Salises, I saw it, passed it to my administrative assistant, and she couldn't deal with it up front, sent it back to me. I tried my best, and then later on I heard I was PVC in charge of planning and development, having to deal with it. So I've tried, therefore what we plan to do therefore is to have an information system that is easy and simple. And the simple mandate I've given to the staff, planning staff, is that at the front you have a simple structure to work with. Simple Excel sheet, which is even a thing, and a very simple reporting structure. The back work will be done in a much more by the technical persons. So we are moving toward a system where you don't have to fill out those forms that some of you would have seen last time. Right, yes, I see Professor Newton, yeah, but we all went through that. I don't want that either. So we're going to have a simple structure, and then the back work, the computer science guys here will deal with all the other fancy work that happens behind. They will take that and move with it. So that's the organizational structure of the planning process, where you fit in as a department, the unit faculty, where we're going to get campus coordination. The campus planning unit is here, and therefore at the university level we pull everything together and say we have an operational plan. So sorry to be a few minutes over, but that's it. Thank
you very much, PVC, for presenting the plan to us again. I'd like to introduce, without too much ado, Mrs. Elsa Webster from BIMAP, who has had some work. She's a consultant there, and she's had some work in helping companies to use this balanced scorecard format that we're going to be using. So she's going to give us some insight on the methodology itself and some insight on what companies do to implement it. So I'll just hand over to you. You can start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Yolande. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I recognize some faces, others I don't. Hi, Sonia. I just saw one that I recognize. I was a little late this morning. I apologize. I meant to get here at 8:30, but I don't usually come this side of the island. I go the other side, and I didn't bargain for the traffic in the Warrens area. So again, I apologize. Professor Downs did a very good job of going through the balanced scorecard and the plan, of going through the plan, but basically what he was presenting was a strategy map, because I was able to follow the whole thing on my strategy map. What are we going to cover this morning? We're going to look at the balanced scorecard approach, how you're going to use it to execute. It's more or less an execution tool to execute the strategy plan. We're going to look at aligning or cascading the strategy plan down to the different departments. We're going to look at the balanced scorecard as a tool for implementing strategy. And your strategy plan, from what I can see, which is this document, the strategy map at a glance. Everybody's seen this, right? The strategy map at a glance is an important tool for getting an idea of what you're all about, and in fact it provides the framework from which details can now be developed in order to implement the strategy. So we're going to look at the balanced scorecard approach, at what we mean by alignment or cascading. We're going to look at the value gap. Why do we need the balanced scorecard? We're going to look at the principles of the balanced scorecard. There are 5 principles that corporations normally use to implement the balanced scorecard. We look at initiatives and reporting, because what we want to do is develop smart objectives which are measurable. By the way, Yolanda asked me to do a short bio, which I didn't do. So again, I'm Elsa Webster, and I started off life in agriculture, believe it or not, with a BSc from the University in St. Augustine, and then I moved into information technology, picked up a couple of degrees there as well, then moved into a master's in business administration from the University of Surrey. I also have an MPhil from the University of the West Indies in plant pathology. So I have a very diverse career that spans a number of areas. Okay, and we can deal with some of that later. Getting back to the balanced scorecard, and I know that time is short. The balanced scorecard is basically a strategic performance measurement framework. It provides a comprehensive view of business performance, and it relates measurements to strategy, vision, and mission. It enables you to have a broader assessment of the organizational performance than with traditional indicators. It allows managers to look beyond the financial metrics and the physical assets to customer measures and intellectual capital. So you notice that Professor Dong spoke about the strategic perspectives, where you looked at the financial perspective. How do we look to our stakeholders? Do we look at employment engagement? Wait, a little fine here with this one. Employment, engagement, and development. These are just the strategic objectives that we would be looking at. So we want to be able to drill down from the strategy map into coming up with individual strategies at the lower levels, which all combine or align with the overall strategic plan. Okay? Most organizations face a strategy challenge, and when I read over your assessment of the 2007 to 2012 strategic plan, some gaps were highlighted, and although you made great strides, it was apparent, or it was noted, that there were a number of gaps which were not addressed. And this is one of the reasons why the balanced scorecard is being used now to fill those gaps, to make sure those gaps are addressed. Less than 10% of strategies effectively formulated are effectively executed. Notice the effectively executed. And why is this? Because in the majority of cases, approximately 70% of cases, the problem is not bad strategy. The strategy has been clearly thought out. However, it is bad execution. And Why do we have bad execution? Because we don't have a shared vision throughout the entire organization. The vision is parked away somewhere in a magazine or in a book or hanging on a wall, or maybe mission and vision in the boardroom. But if you were to ask the average employee, what is your mission, what is your vision, they don't know. And unless you can describe the strategy at the lowest levels of the organization, you cannot implement effectively. Because the units, the functional units, are not able to describe strategy, especially in the corporate world, they don't manage the strategy effectively, because if you don't know what the problems are, you can't manage it. So they have not made strategy execution a core competency. And basically that is what you want to do, to make strategy execution one of the core competencies within the university. So what are the key challenges to strategy execution? One, as I mentioned before, a shared vision throughout the organization. You need to develop a formal strategy execution process. It's not enough to have the strategy. You need to be able to think, talk, breathe strategy, and to be able to develop a formal strategy execution process. I noticed from the presentation before that there is a broad process and reporting structure and tools that have been put in place, so there is a formal strategy execution process, but you now need to drill down on that. Also, you need to align the priorities and objectives of all the corporate services, all the faculties, all the academic departments with the strategy. Now, balanced scorecard as a strategic implementation tool was developed in the 1996 at Harvard University by two gentlemen, Kaplan and Norton, and they've got about 3 or 4 books out on strategy planning and strategy alignment. And these are useful references in understanding how to cascade the overall strategy down to the departmental level. The balanced scorecard process allows an organization to align and focus all of its resources on its strategy. The strategy must be all-encompassing within an organization. We've had several corporate entities in Barbados and throughout the Caribbean which have embarked on using the balanced scorecard to implement strategy. However, in the case of one that I shall leave unnamed, but one of the biggest corporations in Barbados, they've been trying to implement it for the last 10 years, but they've been going through such rapid change within the organization that they have not been able to get the strategy to filter far enough down. You probably guess who it is when I say they've had a number of layoffs, and every time you have layoffs, there are managers who have been critical to the process who have been laid off, and therefore the strategy it exists at the top level of the organization, which is absolutely of no value to the organization. So you have to have total commitment, and you must have all the resources focused on the strategy. The strategy becomes the way that the organization lives and breathes. It is how you accomplish all tasks within the university. So when you look at the strategy map, you look at this and you think, how does it apply to me? You need to ask all of those questions that you were hearing about in the former presentation. How do I implement each area of this strategic perspective? How does it pertain to me? What can I do to contribute to achieving the goals? Now, Professor Downs mentioned, for example, the mission, the vision, the core values, the stakeholders and partners, the strategic perspectives and themes. And he didn't really drill down, but coming after the themes, there are a number of goals which are also mentioned in the strategy map. And those goals give you a clue as to how to implement or how to develop your own goals at the functional unit or the departmental divisional levels. When we say align, to align and focus all of its resources on its strategy, we're looking at the business units, executive team, information technology, budgets, finances, human resources, people development. The University of Leeds, I think it was, found that the effective implementation of the their strategy using balanced scorecard was tied to organizational and personnel development. Moving right along, what are some of the benefits of the balanced scorecard? Not only does it help you to focus, because that's what the major purpose of the balanced scorecard is, to help you to focus on your objectives, focus on your strategy, focus on the perspectives, focus on your vision, focus on your mission. So it provides a fast and comprehensive view of business performance. But in addition, it connects measurement with strategy and vision. Now, normally we think of strategy, we think of vision, but we do not think of metrics. And unless we can measure it, we cannot improve it. Unless we can measure it, we don't know where we are. So it's very important to be able to set objectives and initiatives that can be measured. So your balanced scorecard connects measurement with strategy and vision. In addition, the customer focus allows organizations to direct management attention towards critical processes. It helps you identify those processes which are critical, and it helps you to develop. We're looking at processes now rather than function. So you may think, okay, we have a number of projects to carry out, we have a number of projects to implement, but those projects consist of processes, and you need to be able to follow those processes through, define what the process itself is and what the outcomes should be, what is the desired outcome, what's the desired result, and be able to measure it in order to determine whether you are moving towards those goals. We're creating a balance between the financial measures of performance, that is between financial measures of performance and long-range competitive abilities. What are your long-range competitive abilities? Those are the resources that allow you to be able to compete effectively. These include things like customer satisfaction and the processes that create products and services that result in customer satisfaction. And we heard some examples of some of those earlier. We also balance long-range competitive abilities, such as how is the organization doing, how well is it running, and this is determined by the culture of the organization and the staff, the personnel within the organization. So we are balancing. In previous models, you look mainly at financial performance. Everything was based on financial performance, finances. Now we are looking at the relationship between financial performance and all the other practices within the organization, because those are what determine what your financial performance is going to be. And previously, we did not focus on those. Typically, you have 4 perspectives of performance in the corporate world, and that is, this can be changed up, and we'll see how you have been very ambitious and change this up in your own strategy map. So you look normally at the customer perspective, the financial perspective, the internal business processes, learning and growth. Now, all organizations have internal business processes. If we start at the top, we say, okay, I'm going to start in the middle. We have the UE, vision and mission, and then we want to, where's my mouse? Can't find it. Then we want to look at the customer perspective. So what do we ask ourselves? So in order to achieve our vision, how should we appear to our customers? Do we want to create an environment where people are knocking down the doors to come to UWI? Or do we continue with the environment where people say, I will never send my children back to UWI, or I will not come back to UWI? So we look at the customer perspective. And who are the customers here? The customers are all the stakeholders, including those organizations from whom you get grants. Okay? So in looking at your financial perspective, you say, to succeed financially, how should we appear to our shareholders? How should we, what activities should we engage in that will allow those people who give us grants, for whatever reason, what do we have to put in place? What measures do we have to put in place? What financial performance should we deliver so that when we seek grants, they will be readily available? We look at our internal business processes, and we ask ourselves, okay, to satisfy our shareholders and our customers, what business processes must we excel at? We'll drill down a bit more into these. Learning and growth. Learning and growth normally has to do with the changes that we need to make to improve. Because, for example, organizations in the US are moving towards becoming what they call a learning organization. So we have organizations who are in the Balanced Scorecard Hall of Fame, such as Nokia, a number of those other organizations that have successfully implemented the 4 perspectives of performance. And as I said, there can be more than 4 perspectives. We will look at what differentiates those from the other companies. Now, we mentioned 4 perspectives, and I've been talking about using the balanced scorecard in the corporate world. I just want to show you here that you can modify these perspectives depending on the organization in which you are working. So, for example, in private sector organizations, we usually have 4 aspects of performance: the financial perspective, the customer perspective, the process perspective, and learning and growth. Now, looking at non-profit or public sector organizations, which is where your organization would fit, notice we have a customer perspective because we have a mission that we want to achieve. Then we look at the support perspective. How do we attract resources and authorization for a mission? How do we attract grant money, for example? We also look at the process or operational capacity in order to have a social impact, because that's what you're about. You want to have a social impact. In order to have a social impact and to attract resources and support, which processes should you excel at? Then we look at learning and growth, and again, where the critical areas in which we need to improve. Financial perspective, where can we cut costs? How do we improve our asset utilization, etc.? Now, a gap, why use the balanced scorecard? Is because of this gap that I spoke about, which exists between the mission, vision, and strategy and the employees' everyday actions. That is where you have the biggest gap, and that's a gap that you need to address. So we have a mission which says why we exist, what it is we want to do, where do we want to go. We have a vision, what do we want to be, and we went through all of that in the previous session. We look at the core values, which are the values that are important to us, what are these values that we are going to make sure that these are the overriding principles in every single thing that we do. Integrity, intellectual freedom, excellence, how do we make sure that all our programs demonstrate excellence? Civic responsibility, how do we give back? How do we engage the public? Accessibility, diversity, equity, those are the core values that are stated on the strategy map. Then, down below that, you notice the gap in between here. Can you see the mouse? Right. And we look at total quality management. What must we do to improve? Because performance management is about improving. Also, empowerment, personal objectives. What do we need to do? It's even as down to the individual level. What do we need to do as departments, divisions, even personal staff? What do I need to do personally to help to support this vision based on what has the strategies that have been developed? The balanced scorecard fits in right here in the middle, and the balanced scorecard is meant to address this gap. And what the balanced scorecard does is it translates the vision into operational procedures. It allows you to focus and align what is done at the departmental level, lower down in the organization, with the main strategy. You develop, notice the second one, you develop, where's my mouse again, strategic initiatives. You set priorities. What are the initiatives that we need to embark on to achieve those aspects of the strategic themes and the goals that where we can make a contribution? And of course, the aim of the whole strategy is to lead to satisfied shareholders, satisfied stakeholders, delighted customers, students, alumni, all of your stakeholders, efficient and effective processes, as well as a motivated and a prepared workforce. Because unless the workforce is motivated, strategy implementation will lag. Now, the value gap. let's see, I'm going to just go back a little bit more to see if I forgot anything. No. When we look at the value gap, the mission says that by 2017, the university will be globally recognized as, and you know the rest of it, right? Oh, you don't? Why are you smiling? Of course you know the rest of it. So by 2017, the university will be globally recognized as a regionally integrated, innovative, internationally competitive university. So you need to implement objectives and strategies towards innovation, international competitiveness, and of course, as you say, all of this must be rooted in Caribbean development. So you need to make sure that your programs reflect the fact that UWI is the foremost authority in on the Caribbean and on Caribbean issues. And so you look at the middle circle I have here in this, and you notice that what is forecast is if you continue doing things the way that you're doing them now, you can forecast that result. But look at where you want to be. The desired result is quite a bit higher than that. But unless you implement the changes by using, not necessarily by using the balanced scorecard methodology, because there are other methodologies, but the university has decided to use the balanced scorecard methodology because it's an easy methodology to use, and it is one that helps you to get results and to make sure that you implement the strategy as quickly as possible. So you want to be able to fill that gap between the forecasted and the desired. And the strategic objectives that you have chosen to do that are these 6 below here. Recognize them: employee engagement, financial perspective, teaching and learning, research and innovation, outreach, and internal processes. The actual names may be a little longer, a little shorter. I just tried to fit them in there. So this would be the overall strategy. That is the gap that you're trying to address. Remember again, the forecasted result is the one that you will definitely achieve if you do not make any changes. If, however, you make changes to align what you do at every level with the strategy, then it will be possible to achieve the desired result or get us close to that. So the forecast value, again, that is what will be produced if we kept on doing things in the same way. Desired value is what is intended to be produced in the articulated vision, mission, and strategy. Bridging the gap. How do we bridge the gap? We had each of these perspectives below here. This is 6 perspectives, and as I told you, this is kind of ambitious because most organizations concentrate on 4 strategies. However, the university has articulated 6 strategies which they know to be achievable, which is why they did that. And the way in which we bridge that gap is to create strategies at each level of the perspectives. So again, we go back to the perspectives, and each department, as we drill down, now needs to create their own strategies that are in alignment with the overall strategy. The intention is to focus performance and close the value gap. So when I say focus performance, I mean don't just come up with general objectives. We need specific objectives which are SMART. That means they're specific, they're results-based, they're achievable, they're results-oriented, and they're time-bound. Because if it's not time-bound, and they're definitely measurable, because if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. If you can't measure it, you don't know where you are. So these are the typical 4 perspectives that I mentioned before, and I will just go through these very quickly. Financial deals with income generation, cost reduction, asset utilization, customer service. Either way, this is where you identify your primary stakeholders and what needs to be done to satisfy them in terms of the quality of products that you're offering, the quality of the services, things like responsiveness. Again, we were talking about earlier, we heard Professor Dunks talk about responsiveness of the bursary when you needed something from them. So these are all the things we look at in customer service, both internal customer service and external customer service. Learning and growth. This is where you focus on staff competencies, what competencies are required. You may come up with a strategy that is in alignment with the major strategy. However, you may not have the skills skills and the competencies. So you would identify the skills and the competencies in order to take you to the next level. So you look here at organizational culture, the knowledge base, the tools that are required for performance, things like your ICT infrastructure, technological leadership. The internal processes, which are the processes at which we must excel in order to achieve the vision. All perspectives are interrelated. Your 6 perspectives are interrelated, and all the strategies developed at the levels of the perspectives must be synergized and integrated in order to achieve total organizational alignment, because that's what you're looking for, total organizational alignment. But if you were to focus only on that, then you would not be able to, you would not have cascaded down, and you would not have been able to define your contribution to achieving those particular goals. For example, innovation, I'm talking about the fact that all the perspectives are interrelated. You want to be known for innovation. Innovation satisfies customers, and that is necessary for good financial results, and good financial results are necessary for attracting funding from others and other such resources. Good financial results make the financing of improvements and self-development possible. Okay, what are the overall concepts? BSC is not just a set of measures. All the measures are interrelated. The measures must relate to strategy, and they determine the critical success factors. It is necessary to understand how they relate to each other. The balanced scorecard is not a quick process. It is not enough to just develop strategies. It is important to plan the execution of those strategies, and implementation requires thought, analysis, data gathering, and time. Thought: what is our particular strategy at the department level? How does it relate to the overall strategic plan? What is critical to implementation in implementing the strategy? What are the projects we must implement? How are we going to rationalize them? Etc. What processes do we need to put in place? What are the outputs? What are the indicators of process? What are the expected outcomes? Analysis: what are the linkages between the different functions? What drives the achievement of the goals? What measures correlate with the drivers? Data gathering: what data is available? What data isn't available to allow you to make real-time decisions? How can relevant data be gathered, and how can it be reported to facilitate real-time decision making? You need time to develop balanced scorecards. This cannot be done on the fly, and it is definitely not a one-person job. It requires teamwork and commitment, and it is iterative. Successful implementation may sometimes take months. When you look at the implementation, however, the planning would take a shorter time. It is a never-ending process. Organizations that are known as strategy-focused organizations use the strategy map as the core of the balanced scorecard methodology. This balanced scorecard map then cascades down based on the themes, to the development of initiatives and targets. 5. This is the university strategy. Let me just back up. What I was going to tell you, it is underpinned by 5 principles of performance management, which we will look at in a little while, but the time is short, so I'm going to skip over this, because this basically is what Professor Downs went through, where he spoke about the strategy map, where you have the vision, the mission, the core values, the stakeholders and partners, strategic perspective, themes and goals. You remember him showing you this as well. This is the 6 strategic perspectives, and showing how they're interrelated. Cascading levels. We need to cascade down from the top at the UWI, top of the hierarchy, down to the campuses, the faculties and divisions, departments. Cascading and reporting go hand in hand. This is a slide borrowed from Gideon, 2012. Recognize this one? Where when you're cascading downwards, you have 4 basic items: objectives, measures, targets, and initiatives. What the basic question is, what can we contribute at our level to achieve the strategic perspective? And then when you're reporting, reporting of course is upwards. 2 types: performance of processes and progress of projects. How are installed project deliverables impacting on performance? How well is the project going? I spoke about 5 strategy and execution principles. Number 1, mobilizing change through executive leadership. You must have buy-in from the top. Absolutely must. From the top the top of the organization, but also the top of every department and division. You translate your strategy into operational terms. You align with the you align the organization to the strategy. You motivate to make strategy everybody's job, and you govern to make strategy a continual process. Leadership is especially important. It was found at the University of Leeds, as I told you before, that the pace of transformation was directly linked to the pace of leadership and organizational development. So you need to have committed, empowered, and valued leadership, and it may be necessary to develop leadership, particularly for this reason. University of Leeds example again, this is how they cascade their strategy map down. So you have the overall strategy map, which is over here, a defined set of measures. Then you develop key university targets, and this is cascaded down to the faculty measures and faculty targets, right? So notice that you will use the themes, the goals, and the objectives here to actually apply them to your own divisions. Translating the strategy to operational terms, this is usually a consultative approach, which is highly recommended. It is important to establish ownership, and the single-page strategy map format, which is this, unites the entire organization, and it helps you to detail measures, definitions, and actions to support the overall, at the high-level view. Again, this is an example of cascading in a university. I think this one is Sheffield, where you have the scorecard, the balance scorecard, main balance scorecard, and then you've cascaded down to the business units, departments, teams, and individuals, to the library. You also defined which are shared services in order to utilize your assets. Alignment with strategic objectives. Are we going for time? Okay. The strategy is implemented through the development of strategic initiatives, and you need to rationalize these. So, for example, collect all the initiatives, map them to the strategic objectives, establish criteria for rationalization, create a forced ranking, and rationalize initiatives to meet available finances, resources, and time. This is just a reminder of where we are. We just did the first three, which would have been 1, 2, 3, and we are now down to motivation. Motivation essentially is communication. This is a never-ending process. Communicate not one time, but 7 times, or 7 times 7, whatever is necessary. Because unless you have a communication campaign, you cannot create shared vision. And even after you have a campaign, then you need to keep reinforcing it. So you want to focus on creating high levels of awareness, understanding, ownership, engagement, winning hearts and minds, and you want to put strategy into the voice of all staff. When people talk, they must talk in terms of the strategy. And of course, strategy is everybody's job. Governance, using the University of Leeds as an example again, their governance is based on 4 elements that combine both a long and a short-term picture of progress. You have regular strategy overview meetings that look at the whole map, and they take a high-level evidence-based view of progress. Then you have an annual in-depth theme review, so you will be reviewing these themes, for example, like the strategic perspectives. That's what I mean by themes here. An annual in-depth theme review, and then 2 others would be faculty and service reviews to look at vertical alignment, and an overall annual and deeper consideration of the strategy, right? The main aim of this governance is to allow for clarity of distinction between performance gaps and opportunity gaps. So while you want to look for performance gaps and address those, you also want to look for opportunity gaps which you can address to make things better. And some generic critical success factors: owning the plan, supporting the plan, adapting the plan, and rollout. You find these are your success factors. If you can do these well, have a detailed action plan, make sure that there's ownership, that management is involved, the required competencies and skills of people are addressed, strategic leadership, resource allocation, communication systems are in place, incentives, measurement and rewards, and that the corporate culture is one that is suited to the strategy, right? To summarize, this is what I'm using as a summary slide. So number 1, develop the strategy. Number 2, translate it into operational terms. 3, align it with the organization, and I will say that one again, align, 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 align. Plan your operations, execute them, looking at both process and initiatives, monitor and learn. It's an iterative process, test and adapt, and next 5 years, you go through the whole cycle again, right? Why is it that 9 out of 10 companies fail at strategy execution? Vision, only 5% of the workforce understands the strategy, and that's why I say communicate, communicate, communicate. People barriers, only 25% of managers have incentives that are linked to strategy. So performance indicators are not linked to strategy, and that's why there's a problem. Management problems, 85% of executives spend less than 1 hour a month, believe it or not, discussing strategy. Strategy must become so much a part of the organization that it is discussed all the time, directly and indirectly. And resource barriers, 60% of organizations do not link budget to strategy. References, I gave you one major one here. As long as you read that one, you have everything covered. Right? Thank you very much. Sorry I had to race through that.
Thank you very much, Elsa. We want to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So please, while Elsa is here.
My question is, what piece of advice can you give us that will help us not to fall in to that trap?
From my experience, it is communication and shared vision. Communicate, communicate, communicate. It's like I said, don't assume, but we've told them this before. And this is why you need to have regular progress reports and indicators of progress. This is why I spoke about SMART objectives, specific, measurable, achievable, results-based, and time-bound. By having indicators of progress that you can check, along with our expected outcomes, you can catch it very early. You can catch lack of performance very early. You can catch performance gaps as well as opportunities in order to address them and go forward. But the key is shared vision from top to bottom. Does that answer?
Yeah, just one thing I'm concerned. My one concern is about the overload of the metrics. Because that sometimes happens, and that. When I look at this, how dense this is, I get the impression that there may be a chance that if we're not careful, we can end up with overload of metrics.
And that's a good point. What I would, right now you do, in your progress reports, you do have some metrics. For example, you would say we implemented 15 courses last term. Right? Let's say you're with Open Campus, right? Right. So we implemented 15 new programs. Well, another way of stating the same thing would be that we implemented 15 out of 20, so that we were X percentage short. So you now put things in terms that are measurable. So I don't think it's going to be that onerous, because you already have performance reporting. It's to make it more specific and measurable, so that if you were to say we implemented 15 programs, if nobody knew how many programs you were meant to implement, then it sounded like you did really well. However, 5 were not implemented. Why? How can we address that? Is it skills? Is it demand? As we are moving more at the curriculum level towards demand-driven education, you may say, okay, you want to set up those as some of your indicators. How do you satisfy your funders that these courses are demand-driven and therefore necessary in the workplace? Do they tie back with the Caribbean CVQs, for example, at the Open Campus level? Because you're dealing a lot with workplace development. So it may be just a way, a matter of reporting differently.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
And I'm sure over the next couple of, well, today and tomorrow, you'll actually be developing an actual plan, or at least an example, to then go away and
Yes, you answered a question about rewards, or attempted to. But I want to ask the flip side of that. What about sanctions? How, suppose we have plans and these plans are not executed, at what level within the system are there some type of sanctions that can be employed? How do you coerce anybody to be part of the plan if they don't want to be a part of the plan, or if they're not performing? And follow up to that is, if you have to work together with others and you have that vision that is part of the plan, but you're working with others who don't have that vision and who therefore are not seeing what it is you're trying to put forward, who bells the cat? So this is always the question. You may say, okay, the cat needs to be belled, but who is going to do it?
Yeah.
How do we set it out in a system like this?
In the reporting process and setting smart objectives and initiatives, you may be able to catch that right there at the departmental level, because that unit itself would have its own initiatives, its own processes, its own outcomes, so that one example that I've seen Dr. Gideon use in another address at St. Augustine is that you want to have better teachers, or you want to have better students who graduate with better grades. Well, you may start your project, maybe that you start training your teachers, you go through the process and you see how that leads to the outcome. You can track that right there at that particular level. So if you have a governance structure in place to catch those performance gaps at, before they become so huge that you can't address them, if you can catch them at every level. Now, with regard to cooperating with maybe other departments or other people, it's all about shared buy-in. It's creating a culture based on strategy. It's becoming a strategy-focused organization. And it's something you just have to keep working at.
Okay, I think we'll close it here. Elsa, will you stay for the break?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, I'm sure that you.
I would
can
love to stay for the rest of the session this morning.
Oh, you're invited to. Yes. If you have any other questions, please do seek her out. We want to thank you very much for coming and making that presentation so very relevant to UWA. Thanks very much for that. I just wanted to say a few things. The next session is going to be by Dr. John Gideon, and he is going to now give us an idea of how, begin to introduce us to the idea of how the balanced scorecard will be implemented at UWA. I've put a sheet on your table, and it's in groups of 1 to 6. These groups are not set in stone, so if you see that there are people who you work more closely with, or who your department is more, your operational plans would be closely linked, then you can change groups. So it's not set in concrete, but we would like you, when you come tomorrow, to sit in your groups, and we'll have numbers on the table so that you know. And I'd like to introduce Dr. John Gideon, who is going to take you through this next session.
Great. Good morning, and welcome from the land of Soca warriors, the second best nation in the Caribbean. The second best nation. I didn't say what the first best is, right? Yeah, so we have half of our office in Trinidad, and we have half our office up in here because PVC Downs did not want to move to Trinidad and have one big happy family. Before we had Dr. Tawari, before he became a minister, right? Okay, good. Yeah, before I get to my presentation, I just wanted to address your question about sanctions, right? Yeah. It reminded me, my last degree is in education, right? So when I'm training teachers, I had a teacher in high school ask me, how do I control these kids? They're always talking and making noise and throwing things and acting out and things like that, right? In other words, how can I sanction them, right? And you know the answer to that question, right? It's not to sanction them. Why are they doing that? Not because they're bad kids, because they're bored. You're not being a good teacher. You're not grabbing their attention, right? If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you wouldn't have that problem. Okay, so I think that the same answer applies to us here in the management sense, right? Why are our employees turned off? Why aren't they performing? Why aren't they, right? And in the MBA class, we teach our students, show me how management treats the staff, and I'll show you how staff treats the customer. There's never any difference, right? And if you think about yourselves, think about why you're frustrated personally. And a lot of it has to do with how you're treated by higher-ups. Maybe not necessarily your immediate boss, but maybe, right? So the answer is in becoming, better managers. And also leaders. And I think we're mixing up this leadership. We keep on talking about leadership on all these slides. We're missing the point on what that is. Leadership has nothing to do with position. The true definition of leadership is when people follow you voluntarily because they trust you, they're inspired by you, and they think that you're on their side. If you don't have those qualities, you're not a leader. You're a manager that has a position or authority to do certain things. I think that's what we're confusing. When we talk about moral authority to do things, that's what it is. And we don't have that a lot with our quote, leaders, right? We have a lot of managers running around that call themselves leaders, right? I think a lot of the motivation is going to come when those managers start learning to become real, true leaders that people follow voluntarily, right? Elsa said two very important things that I want to bring your attention to in her presentation. And the first was strategic execution has to become an organizational core competency. Okay? And what is a competency? A competency, among other things, is a set of skills. Right? Well, one of the reasons that we didn't do well in the last plan was because we don't have execution as a competency. And one of the competencies is project management. Once you get out of engineering and management studies, the other disciplines, that's not part of your discipline, right? If you're teaching history or English or whatever, right? So I think we shouldn't, tomorrow we're going to be filling out these forms, right? We're not filling out forms. It's not, if it was that easy, we wouldn't need any competencies because anyone could do it. When that form asks you, insert the performance indicator, that's a skill. To create that performance indicator, right? When it says set a target, that's a skill, right? When it says identify an initiative to fulfill that strategic objective, that's a skill, right? And I wish this workshop could be longer, right? But we're going to try to impart some of those skills tomorrow, and then the rest of them I'm going to write some tutorials and put them up on our website. Is everyone aware of the website? We have a balanced scorecard support website. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Yolande will circulate the URL, the password, and the username for that. And we have a lot of documents on it. We're trying to make it a one-stop shop. Because back in September when we started the strategic planning process, how many were in the Cave Hill strategic planning team? Okay. Yeah, you were exposed to our terms of reference. We had those 5 exercises that you had to go through, right? And we put a lot of stuff up there, including a glossary, because people use terms in all kind of different ways, right? If I ask all of you guys what's the difference between a goal and objective, I get 20 different answers, right? So we're going to put a lot of resources up there to help you out, right? So this is only a starting point. And the other thing that Elsa said, that we need a formal strategic execution process. And that's what I'm going to talk about for the next 15 minutes. Whenever you introduce a major strategic change to an organization, you just can't have everyone sitting in their silos doing a little piece. You need to have teams and know what each team is responsible for and how they relate in the roles and responsibilities. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. Okay. So I'm going to show you a diagram that has the execution framework that shows the whole university and all the players in this plan. And then we'll talk specifically in each slide about roles and responsibilities. And if you have any questions, jot those down, and we'll have a little question and answer at the end. Okay. You can see where we've gone so far. When we did the plan, we did these first several items here. And the strategy map, we have a strategy map at the university level. We're going to, that's not part of our system right now in terms of rolling it down, but we want to do that eventually, right? We don't want to overwhelm you with a total balanced scorecard system up front, right? So we're gonna do it in phases. We do have a balanced scorecard, and I'll show you that tomorrow at the university level. And what we want to really talk about today is cascading, right? So it's how do we get this university level, the plan and objectives, and get it drilled down to departmental level, right? And the balanced scorecard then becomes our management system too. It's not only a measurement system as a scorecard states, but how do we actively manage this so we don't fall into all the pitfalls that Elsa identified earlier. Okay, this is the diagram here. I wish I could, let me take the mic. Right, I'd like a rather mobile mic. So this is the university, and up here we have the executive management team, right, that is the ultimate authority outside of council. And then we have PVC Downs here in this box as our head of planning and development. And this is us, most of our department, down in St. Augustine, University Planning Office, and PVC staff up here. On this side we have the campus principals. Then we have the campus planning offices. And we want the campus planning offices to play, they played a very passive role as far as I'm told in previous plans. We want to get them more involved and be the voice of the principal on the campuses. Of course, then we have the deans and directors like bursary, IT, registrar, things like that, and all the way down to departments. Okay? Now, in the strict balanced scorecard system, it goes down one more level, down to the individual, where we start putting in all those things into the annual appraisal form of the individual at this level here. Okay. Over here, we're setting up 6 perspective team leaders and teams. So you saw the 6 perspectives. Each one of those is going to be headed by a PVC or a university level director, like university director of the university registrar, etc. Okay. They're going to be accountable for those perspectives, and they're going to work with the campuses to achieve that. And we have to remember that there's going to be different types of initiatives or projects. Some of them are going to be university-wide, like single virtual university, harmonizing curriculum across the university, harmonizing administrative systems, because we all use different forms, we have different procedures, we have different policies and things. There's going to be campus-wide projects that affect the whole campus. They'll be faculty-wide or division-wide. And then the last type of project will be one that's just unique to a particular department. Okay? So this is what kind of starts making it complex. Right? So let's take a look at some of the roles of each of these guys. Okay, executive management team. Of course, they're the ones that have the highest, the body that has the highest oversight. And basically, they're going to review the balanced scorecard reports. Our unit's going to summarize them from different sources, and then the PVC will approve that report and send it to them for consideration, right? And then they're going to make basically recommendations in 2 areas, either on the content of what we're doing, saying, well, we don't need all these strategic objectives, or we can combine these ones, and we could change some strategies here, right? Or they'll talk about changing the balanced scorecard system itself, how we're doing that, what's working and not working. Okay, then we have PVC Downs. Okay? And he's the main coordinator for the plan, for both creation of the plan and the execution of it. So he's going to look at the reports we put together for him, and to monitor, analyze, make recommendations on our strategic performance. And he also needs to promote stakeholder buy-in, right? The PVC planning really cannot command any principal or any other group in the campus to do anything. Right? He has to go more on persuasion. I was faced with the same thing when I was educational technologist for St. Augustine. My job was to promote educational technology with the faculty and get them to put their courses online, use more blended learning, use more technology and things like that. And I had no authority to tell anyone to do anything. So based on his personality, that will work or not work. Okay. In terms of prospective leaders, these are the 6 teams that are being set up headed by PVCs, right? And they're accountable for the perspectives. So they're going to coordinate strategy execution in both the administrative and academic areas aligned to the strategic plan, and prepare progress reports. Because EMT is going to want to know, hey, what's going on there? Why isn't so-and-so happening? Why aren't we hitting some targets that we set? Right? And they're ultimately going to be responsible. Okay, then this is our office here, and we're going to assist the PVC in his duties. And it's going to be mostly well, up until now it's been mostly designing the systems we're using right now, designing facilitating the strategic plan, designing the balanced scorecard system and how we're going to roll it out, and doing what we're doing right now, going around to the different campuses and training people, and then once the system's in place, help gather data and organize reports. And of course, recommend changes to anything as we see. The campus principals, they have to execute that plan on every campus, right? Or execute their particular strategic plan within the university-wide strategic framework. So they're going to approve and monitor the strategy, because they really, they're holding the strings to the purse, and they can't fund every project required for the strategic plan. So we're going to have to decide what are priority projects, and that's going to start with the principal, and he'll set that framework, right? He'll liaise with the prospective leaders to make sure that we're doing things in sync across campuses. And then he'll delegate his day-to-day responsibility to the CPO, the campus planning office, so that they can organize. In fact, in St. Augustine, they already started the 6 prospective teams at the principal level, right? Getting together, made of deans, some head of departments, directors, and things like that, to set that campus-wide framework and under which everyone else can operate. And then, of course, review and approve reports before they go upward. So what are the campus planning offices going to do? Well, I kind of alluded to that already. Coordinate campus development priorities with other strategic initiatives. And remember, we're rolling over, our 2007-2012 plan just doesn't stop on July 31st. There's a lot of projects that are in the pipeline, right, that need to be completed, right? So we need to have a way to integrate those with some of the new ones that we identified on our new plan. Great. And of course, they're going to implement the cascading of the balanced scorecard system to make sure all the faculty and all the divisional heads are rolling it down to departmental level. And of course, once we start executing, they're going to organize reports, right? And I think we need to make a distinction here. We're basically reporting on 2 things. We're reporting on projects, and we're reporting on processes. And tomorrow I'm going to get a little more into that distinction, but I want you to start thinking about that from today. Do we all know the difference between a process and a project? You don't sound too confident. Maybe I should ask, the difference between an objective and a goal? Okay, that's even more confusing, right? Yeah, a project is just something, is what we're calling initiatives. The balanced scorecard language calls projects initiatives so that they stick in your head. And a project, we know, has a beginning and an end. And the target of a project, is to improve a process. Okay? You can think of a strategic plan as, here's our vision, here's what we want to be in 5 years, here's where we're at. How do we get there? A very simple way of thinking of that is that all these projects we're identifying, right? Our strategic objectives are giving us the strategies, but really is going to get us there is the execution of projects. So the strategic plan is a collection of related projects that take us from where we're at to get us to that vision. Right? And when we do a project, there's some kind of deliverable. That's project management language, right? You might call it output, but the technical word is deliverable. And when we take that deliverable and we install it in our normal process, we should see an improvement in that process. So when we put a new computer system in to registry, we should see registration become faster, cheaper, whatever. When we train teachers and put them back into the classroom, the teaching process should get better as reflected by student grades and things like that. Right? So remember, we're reporting on two different things in this process. Projects, how well those are going, and the impact once the project is done. Is it really improving the outcomes that we're looking for? Okay. Campus planning teams. Well, we had set those up in last September when we created the strategic plan. So what we're going to do now is use those teams and other people who want to become involved to assist the campus planning office. Because in Trinidad we have one person in our campus planning office. Right? I think, how many you got here, Owen? 2 or 3. You can't possibly do all this work. And I think they got 3 people. They got Nicola and they got three people in Mona too, right? Open campus, how many you got? One, yeah, right. Yeah, so do you see why this needs to be a team approach? But at least those are the anchors that are permanently there to help organize those things. Okay. When we get down to deans and divisional directors, okay. They're going to have initiatives that are cut across the whole faculty or cut across the whole registry or cut across the whole bursary. Plus, they're going to set that framework for the departments lower. So they're going to take what the principal sees as priority areas and try to operationalize those, cascade downward, coordinate the faculty-wide projects, and they're going to approve the balanced scorecard plans coming from the bottom. I know you've heard bottom up, top down, cascading. You're getting all these terms thrown at you. Yeah, the bottom's going to develop their plan, but it has to be approved and still be within the framework of what's coming down from the top, right? Or else the tail's wagging the dog, right? Okay. All right, and then finally, they're going to prepare reports at their level to go up. Now we're down at the bottom here with departments and other units. Okay, and this is where the majority of the work gets done, right? Because that's where the majority of the people are. So they're going to be. They need to align their departmental priorities with the balanced scorecard plan, of course, in approval with their dean or divisional director, and submit that plan to get approved, right? And then start executing those strategies over the next 5 years, and of course prepare their reports. And the reporting we're going to talk about tomorrow is doing it on a annual basis. We have a provision for project reporting. The process reporting, the impact reporting is annual, but we have an option there for project reporting if you want to do it by semester. And you don't want to wait a whole year to find out you're in the ditch, right? You want to find out early on that, hey, this project hasn't even started, a semester's passed, so people can start asking questions, but why is that happening, or where are our priorities and things like that. So we'll talk about that how that works a little bit more in detail tomorrow. Okay. So those are all the players, and I'll entertain any questions that you have on those.
What about software to support project management? In other words, you have a project, is the university going to use any sort of software or anything to help us manage these projects, or are we going to just be using scraps of paper as been happening?
Okay. Being a good planning department, we thought about that, and you don't need, it's a degree of how sophisticated do you need to be. We're not putting a man on the moon, right? So a lot of our projects are not going to require project management software. When we're doing the single virtual university, that's going to require software, right? Project management software. What we've done instead, most of your projects are going to be not that sophisticated and pretty simple. So we have a form called the Initiative Planner that lays out, major tasks, subtasks, durations, who's responsible, resources needed, cost. Just a very simple, what you might call an action plan, I guess, in common language. And that's going to be available on the website. We're not going to go over that tomorrow, right? But you're going to need to do that planning activity in order to answer questions on the plan, because they're going to ask you what the deadline is. How can you come up with a deadline unless you know how many months that plan's going to take? How are you going to put in the costs of your resources unless you've thought through the plan in detail and know, okay, I need this and this and this and this and this, it's going to cost this much, right? And I suspect that was not going on in a detailed way in the last several plans. Right, we're trying to just pulling things out and say, I think we need, I think this thing should take about a year, and we should, So I think we need to get a little more scientific, and a little more evidence-based in our approach to this. So you're going to get that, and every form that we give you also has an instruction sheet, so that even if you forget everything I tell you tomorrow, you just pick up the instruction sheet and it says box A, here's how you fill out box A. Box B, here's how you fill out, right? So you can take that away. Okay? A related question though is, are we going to have a balanced scorecard software? If you've ever looked on the net, you've seen all these dashboards and nice graphs and pie charts, and yeah, we're moving towards that. We're researching different types of software that could fit our needs here, because there's off-the-shelf software. If we try to develop that here, it would take years and be very expensive and may not give us what we want, right? So we're going to try to look at that. In the meantime, we've developed a manual system on Excel that's going to give us what we need to get through until we can get that electronic system in place. The question was about the feedback process throughout this, and we realized that was a major fault of the last several plans, right? You heard about all this strategic plan at the beginning, and then you didn't hear anything for the next 5 years, unless you were a very senior person, right? And we want to get that down to that everybody knows what's going on. Is everyone aware that we had a portal when we were creating the strategic plan that anyone, student, staff, faculty, can go on and make suggestions? And we took those suggestions and we pulled them in when we were formulating the strategic plan. We're going to keep that portal up as an open source of feedback. But also we're getting marketing. We're going to take marketing more from a PR posture to a more detailed feedback like you're talking about. And when our marketing department gave their presentation, I think that they're next, right? Communicating the plan?
That's her, actually.
Well, that's you. Okay, right. You're the PR person here, right? Or marketing?
But she's marketing.
Marketing, right. Okay, yeah. Yeah. If you've been talking with Dawn Marie, right. Did you see her presentation that she did for us in St. Augustine? Terry Ann, right. Terry Ann was, yeah. Dawn Marie wasn't available that day, right. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot more keeping people posted about what's going on. So Where's marketing going to get their information? They're going to get it from our office, because we're going to be gathering it from the campuses and things like that. And then we're going to be feeding it to marketing so that they can turn around and tell everybody, you know, here's where we're at on certain things. And basically, when you talk about organizational communication, you ever hear of the 4 Ps? The 4 Ps: purpose, process, progress, problems. Purpose, why are we doing this? Everybody has to know why we're doing this. What is the process? Step 1, step 2, step 3. What problems are we running into when we're doing this? And what are we doing about it? And progress, where have we reached so far, right? So it's going to involve, you know, feedback like that to everybody to get them more involved. Other questions? Yes.
I'm curious about the link between what I see as the main operating units, meaning the faculties and academic departments, and other units that support their work, and how in developing the plans for the support units, we are kind of going to coordinate so that we, as support units, understand what we should be factoring in order to help them.
Okay, you're in an academic, administrative unit, right?
Quality.
Quality, okay. You quality people are always harassing people, you know that. Yeah. That's how you're seen sometimes, you know. Let me start out with this statement. I'll tell you, I'll take off my educator hat and put on my management consultant hat. 75% to 80% of all problems in an organization are caused by fill in the blank. Did I hear people not doing their job? No, 80% of all problems in an organization are caused by dysfunctional systems. And that's why if you just count the strategic objectives, about 90% of them deal with systems and not people. We still need to train people and motivate people and engage people. That's not going away. But dysfunctional systems, the system that affects the way people behave. And if you have a dysfunctional system, you're going to get dysfunctional behavior from your staff, which we sometimes interpret as something that needs to be sanctioned, or, you know, someone doing something they shouldn't, right? So we have a whole perspective called internal operational processes, right? Improving those. Because the biggest thing that the academics complain about is, you know, when we try to hire, it takes us a year to get somebody. They talk about bursary systems, other registry systems, examination system, right? And the only reason that you guys are there are to support the academics, right? And the re-engineering that we're talking about is to make sure that comes together in an integrated way. So we're not acting as in silos, right? So that we're actually supporting those academics so that they can do their jobs, because that's our core process. As PVC said today, he outlined our core processes. So we get those outputs or those outcomes that we desire. Campus planning office are understaffed and very busy right now, and how we're going to give them more capacity. Well, that's the thing that PVC Downs talked about when he first took over last July. He said we need to get these campus planning offices beefed up and aligned. There was no relationship between what those guys did and what our Office of the University Planning does. There was, you know, we were doing our thing, and all the campus planning office doing their thing, and there's no alignment there. So PVC Down very, very sensitive about that, and he wants to integrate those and give them the resources they need to execute the way they should be doing.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I'd like to introduce. You want to see all of me for that? Yes. All of you. This is Avril Husbands from Butterfield Bank, and they have implemented successfully the balanced scorecard. So she's here to give us their experience. So thank you very much for coming.
And I'm told that I'm to start by saying something about myself because I did not provide a bio. I didn't have time. As you've heard, Avril Husbands, if the presentation is terrible, if you recognize lack of knowledge, or if I'm disorganized or any of that, you can blame it on the University of the West Indies Cave campus, because I did my BA Hons here, Diploma in Education here, and an MBA here. So you're totally responsible for the product. Let me just say, I'm going to try to share with you some aspects of our experience with the balanced scorecard. It is, let me warn you, that it is nowhere as complex as your strategic plan, your balanced scorecard is. As we go through, you'll see that we have 4 perspectives, and for us it's very simple. We have to make money for shareholders, and we have to pay a bonus to staff as long as we're making money for shareholders. Now, that is, I noticed right away, I'm not sure how you're going to treat with this in the university system, because we do have the option of driving progress by using that bonus. That's a whip that we use. And where we have those 4 dimensions, and I do have a presentation, but this is flowing, so let me run with it. The 4 dimensions that we have identified as being critical for us, which will be the financial, obviously, the customer, internal processes, and people, which will be your growth and so on, development. Those 4 dimensions, targets are set for all 4 of those, and all 4 of them have to be achieved. Your targets have to be achieved in each jurisdiction by every individual in order to get that bonus. So that if one jurisdiction does not do well in terms of achieving their results, you have to have all 4 pieces in order. The jurisdictional, 3 pieces, the jurisdictional performance, the individual performance, and the group performance. Those 3 will determine whether or not you get the results and you get the bonus. So it is really very simple for us. I'll share. And these are some of the areas that I'm going to cover. We're going to talk a little bit about why we have a balanced scorecard, the challenge of acceptance in the company culture, how it is cascaded and reported, championing the change and meeting the challenge of resistance, and what added value and results we see. I'm just hoping I have the right presentation up, because this went through several iterations. So why the balanced scorecard? It was against the background of recognizing that the world was changing, and we needed to do something to keep our business at the forefront. And when you think of Butterfield, you have to think of Butterfield in 7 jurisdictions. It's not just Barbados. The largest jurisdiction being Bermuda, where Butterfield is very well established. Started off with the vision of 1 person, and kind of very, as you would expect, traditional, stiff, very structured, very well managed in terms of controls and objectives and so on. So a tight regulatory environment imposed by the bank itself. We recognize that the traditional emphasis on financial results would not be enough, because, and certainly this was even more evident as we moved into the years of 2000 and I would say from about 2005, it became evident that banks would not be the same as they used to be, where you sat in there, people came to you, put their money in there, went away and left it while you used it. All of a sudden, we had to be more accountable, more careful. We had all of the problems of 2007, 2008, which resulted in some heavy losses. And how then, for goodness sake, do you survive as a bank in that kind of environment? Service-driven models, that we decided that we had to focus more on the customer. Service-driven models require different measures. You're not looking at the balance sheet anymore to tell you how you're doing, but you have to find some other way of, first of all, pulling everybody in and getting them to understand that this is an important part of our business, and then to how do you measure those results. And this is where the decision around the 4 perspectives became critical. Your situation is no different to ours. When I first started university at age 10, somewhere in the 70s, the university was a pillar of, nobody questioned anything that the university did. Money flowed into the university, governments actually paid, and life was good. And then we have people like the accountants having the nerve now to say that, and I see that the conversation has not stopped, it's ongoing, but they have the nerve to say that perhaps you should not be subsidizing the university the way you used to. So things are changing, and so I fully understand why they need to look at how you're doing things and how you can get better results with fewer resources. That's a problem that we face naturally in the private sector. It has come to KFL. So the strategic plan then, we found, provided the blueprint. But having the strategy was not enough, and that you've had that experience because you had a strategy and it sat on people's shelves, desks, boxes under the desk, and nothing happened. So the challenge really is, how do you get people engaged around a common purpose? We need to make X dollars, we need to improve our customer service, we need to improve our internal processes. How do you get people to be engaged around all of that? Because really the issue is performance. After a while, it's not about the strategic plan. Strategic plan is nice, but it has to be tied to performance in order for it to make sense and give you the results that you need. And what is the link between the strategy and performance? I'm suggesting to you the balance scorecard. We use it in that way. So if you want organizational results, you have to engage your people. You have to find a way to get everybody on board around that strategic plan. Everybody in the room is engaged around the strategic plan, right? I know there are people sitting here saying, well, let me wait and see how this is going to go. Well, it didn't work last time. I don't know why they think it's going to work this time. Some people are thinking, this is nonsense. I have important stuff to do, academic papers to write. This is going to take up too much of my time. Very akin to the problem that we face in organizations. The biggest problem you're going to face, and this is perhaps the worst news you're going to get, is that you are going to get resistance. People do not like to do performance. They don't like to deal with performance, whatever your tool is. Performance is it takes up too much time to have to actually, and I'm going to find this very interesting. I hope I get to follow up some of what you're doing, because I cannot imagine how it's going to go. When you are my head, we both are doing all this academic work and so important to in the university system, and then you are going to talk to me about my performance. I don't know how you're going to get over that, but I'm telling you now, that's going to be one of your biggest barriers. And it will require the commitment to make it work. It will require strong leadership. We have strong leadership. It's called a bonus, reward. So that if the CEO, in his wisdom, sent out the balanced scorecard as he does every year, we get it from Bermuda. If he sent it out and there was nothing to support, to drive it, he would go on sitting and waiting. But he has some teeth. I don't know where you're going to get your teeth from. But this is basically, you're trying to put your strategy at the center of the organization, of the university, and to engage your people, to get your managers involved, to get the commitment, and you're going to need leadership. I heard that word mentioned earlier. I don't know if university professors and so on, admin heads, think of themselves as leaders, but that is an examination you're going to have, because guess what? Just now, you're going to be responsible for getting results from people. So, how do you link the strategic plan to performance? You have to find a way to build ownership and commitment. There has to be clarity around what each person needs to do, and this is what we had to go through, clarity around what each person needs to do in each of your key areas to achieve results. So you're aligning your corporate goals, your big fuzzy things up there that somebody sits in a room and they say, yes, this year we need to get a 20% increase in our financial performance. And they put that on the strategic plan, and it comes on the balanced scorecard, and I'll show you as we go through. It comes down now to the jurisdiction, and the CEO says, okay, the balanced scorecard is ready, and he sends it out. And heads of department like myself then have the wonderful task of sitting down and determining what we are going to do, how we are going to set goals to achieve that 20%. And you get some interesting things happening because, like, I'm in HR, I'm head of HR. We don't do money. So what do I have to do with the 20%? You're going to have an interesting question to answer those questions, because everybody has to have goals in each area. You can't say, well, this piece, this perspective, I don't like this one, so I'm leaving that out. Is that the way that it is going to be set up, that everybody's involved on each perspective, or you could choose your four, or?
Yeah. What we're going to do is, on the form, on the planning form, we're listing all 67 strategic objectives. Not all those are going to apply to every department. You're going to look at them and say, can I contribute to this one? Nope. Okay, you're going to look at the next one. Can I contribute? Yeah, I can contribute to this one, right? So we're going to see where we can contribute, and that's the driving question. That sounds like a lot of fun, so I could choose what I want to do. Well, some are impossible to contribute to, right? But even though the ones we identify, the funds will not permit us, and time will not permit us to do all of those, so we have to prioritize them, right? But we have to at least think it all the way through, right? But your plan is over how many years? 5. 5 years. And you're putting all your goals in at once? Well, we have the goals from the plan, but this exercise we're doing tomorrow is just to look at the next 2 years. Okay. So there will be some distillation of those goals as well, because we only set our goals for 1 year at a time, which allows us to manage it, and that's something that you will have to give some thought to. How are you going to manage when you have all of these goals and all this stuff out there? Now, somebody asked about online help. How do you pull all of this together? And we use a tool called Success Factors, which is designed to mirror the balanced scorecard, so that it gives the 4 perspectives that we've chosen, it gives life. It allows us to go online, put our goals in online. We can, when it comes up, it gives you your 4 perspectives. We can then put in our goals. Well, ideally you should sit with your manager and put in your goals. Some managers say you just go ahead and put in your goals, you know what we've talked about, and then they go back to them and they check them. The way that it works, for example, every time one of your reports makes a change, an email goes to your manager, so your manager can then go and see where the change has occurred. You can update your goals there. You can indicate when things are not on target. You can indicate, for example, if something has to be moved to another time period because you don't have the resources to complete it. It really allows for the conversation to go on online. And I agree with you that a tool like that would be very useful for tracking, because
I mean, it's crazy. Imagine that there are times when you don't see each other for a whole year. So if a lot of it can happen, you can be talking to each other online. That certainly helps to keep the process alive. As I started by saying, we look at 4 perspectives, and ever since I've been there, these are the 4 that we've been focused on, and these are the traditional 4. They work for us. Obviously, your environment is different, so you will have looked at yours differently. This is a diagram that most people will be familiar with, so I don't think I need to spend time on that. But for us, when we look at the financial perspective, we're saying that we have to focus on revenue and cost effectiveness. So even if I cannot contribute to the generation of revenue, as a department, I can certainly contribute to cost effectiveness. So there it comes to life for us. And that way, you can make sure that everybody is on board with a financial objective that contributes to the overall result. Business processes. This is an area where we do a lot of work, where we look, and one of the reasons why we do a lot of work here is because it affects the customer. And Butterfield has been quite effective when it comes to improving its customer service and moving to the #1 position. The industry does a survey every year, so we get feedback that tells us how we're doing there as well. Everybody is empowered to look at business processes. If, for example, a CSR sees that this process is too long, it's frustrating the customer, this form is nonsense, they can bring it to the attention of the organization. And I've seen changes happen as a result of that process. Because you're beginning now to give people a stake in the organization. Their opinions matter. Learning and growth obviously falls squarely under me, and one of the things we have done is to introduce a learning management system, so folks can take courses online. They have to complete at least 4 days of training every year. We don't make it difficult for them because some people are also at university doing degrees and this kind of thing. We take that into account, but it's important for us that people continuously learn, because that would enable us to change quickly and to it keeps the organization too alive when people are interacting at that kind of level. And #1 in customer focus, service, we aim to be excellent in this area. And some of the ways that we do, the very practical ways, for example, we have a service navigation team that could be a goal. Your membership of the service navigation team, what you contribute, those things can be measured, and those are things that impact directly on the organization and on the kind of organization that you have. One of your problems is going to be writing goals, but we'll come to that in a minute. I just wanted to give you a little sort of idea about what the balanced scorecard looks like. There are more sections, but I didn't want to get into that because then it's ratings and percentages and details of how your payouts are done and so on for the end of the year. But if you can see, is it clear enough? If you look in the people dimension, at the group level, the people perspective is worth 20% of the total. We split it into 50-50 for our department, and when you total it, it comes back to 20. There are people in this room who understand these things better than I do, but there are what do you call those again? Weightings, the weightings, which tie back into the overall group scorecard. Right? So when you get this as a manager, you put in your people goals and your performance measures, and this is what is cascaded down. So the managing director will get this. He will sit with each of his managers, send it out to them. They'll sit and agree on what actual objectives will go into each section. How are we going to measure at the end? Because at the end of the year now, when we come to have a conversation about my performance, he's going to be focusing on the measures. Have I in fact achieved what I said I was going to achieve? Right? So that is the really fun part. So success factors, which I showed you previously, it adds structure and discipline we find to implementing the balanced scorecard, which would have been a lot more difficult to achieve on paper. It helps to transform the data to information and knowledge, because I can go on, I see the entire organization. I can go and see, for example, where everybody is on their targets. I can look and see, they give you, somebody mentioned dashboards, it produces graphs, so I could get a sense of what's happening across the organization. Are there people who haven't started on targets yet? I could have a conversation with the head of the department. I noticed that 3 people in your department have not started on any of their targets. What's going on? How can we help? Is there a problem with training or support? Is there something that needs to be done? So it's an excellent way of signaling where there are problems in the organization. Remember that the whole purpose of this is not to set up people to fail. You want people to be successful, because if you're not successful, the accountants will have something to say again. So it is very important that you achieve your objectives. Even if you don't achieve an objective, you must be in a position to say why it wasn't achieved. And that could happen. Some resource may have been missing, somebody may have been ill, and it accommodates those kinds of things. But that tracking is very important. Feedback. I cannot stress enough, and I will mention it again, how important communication is in this process. Now, I've been to the university here 3 times, so I know how it is. Good. That is going to have to change. We're actually going to have to talk to each other more for this to happen. Otherwise, you would have started on a futile journey. You're going to get frustrated. You're actually going to have to talk to the people who work for you. If you have an online system, it makes it easier. It does not replace the conversation, and that is something that I had to work on in my organization, because people felt that once they had put in the goals and pressed send, it went to their managers and we had nothing to talk about again. But that's not what it's supposed to do. It's to provide me with information, data I can analyze, see where my department is going, so that I can have a structured conversation. So about cascading and reporting. As I said earlier, the group CEO, in his wisdom, determines what the goals, the objectives will be for the year. And these are cascaded down to the jurisdictional heads, who then sit with their senior management team. So I would be a part of that. And at that point, I go away and I determine, how am I going to get this work done? And I look at the resources that I have, I talk to them, and I share, this is what we have to achieve. And then I go through with everybody what their contribution will be to achieving that goal and what support they require in order to achieve that goal. It's no use telling somebody to send you reports in Excel when that person has never used Excel in their life. So clearly you're going to have to spend 2 or 3 weeks making sure that that person gets trained. It may not be you, not you personally, but there must be some system in the university, even in the university. And don't tell me everybody coming out of the university uses Excel, because I meet these people. You may have to go back a little bit and give people that level of comfort. The weighting of the goal, of course, will change depending on the role. If your role in the university is a teaching role, clearly the weight of the goals in that area are going to be more heavily weighted than, for example, what is something kind of less important?
Archiving documents.
Is that a major role, or it might be something like to ensure that reports are done, or to do community work or something like that, which clearly cannot be weighted as heavily as your substantive role. So that is where you begin to get your a feel around your weights. Obviously, the reason why you exist to start with will have to be given primary, yes. All right, so that is the thing about cascading, is that it provides transparency, because people then know what I am doing and what I'm responsible for. Now, I don't know if that's going to be comfortable for you, but in the private sector where people actually have to work, it's okay. So then it would work for you as well, where you have no difficulty sharing. Listen, these are my objectives. This is what I have to achieve. This, therefore, is my expectation of you, because you are supporting me in achieving this big objective. Right? So great. It works for you as well. There's a clear line of sight between what the top of the organization is trying to achieve and what's happening down at the bottom. If it is that the group CEO determines that we are all going to pick apples, this allows you to look and see whether anybody has put pears in as an objective, because that doesn't make sense. What we're looking for is apples. So it keeps people honest in that way, because we have a lot of people who come to work and work really, really, really hard, and we don't know what they're doing. So this success factor is when you start to plan using a balanced scorecard. It really helps people to look and see, these tasks fit here, these fit here, and so on. So there is greater clarity around expectations. Why am I here in the first place? And as I said, I described this process to you, where once the goals come in, they are cascaded down, and the people at the bottom know what the goals at the top are and how they connect to that. So clear line of sight. No more mystery around that. I said that I would mention goals, because this is one of the most difficult things that we have found. Once the manager gets the goal, cascading it does not mean that you give it to your subordinate exactly as you got it. You have to look to see what is realistic. What part can my subordinate play in this process? And you have to actually create a goal that speaks to that specific part of what you're trying to achieve, that your subordinate can in fact achieve. Very important that goals are measurable. I know that you've heard this 1,000 times, but this is a part of this experience, which if it is not, it's going to be painful at the end if it's not done right at the beginning, because when you sit now to say with somebody about their performance, and you're making decisions about this person in terms of tenure, in terms of whether you're going to retain them, in terms of whether, how do you get increases? Automatic, or you have to actually work for them? Different people get increases in different ways. They're tied to targets? Uh-oh. Okay, so we leave that one alone. We leave that one alone. The truth of the matter is, if the goals are not well written, you will have endless arguments with your subordinates around, was it achieved or was it not achieved? And you're going to find yourself in a lot of problems. It's very important that you take the time to make sure that those goals are well written, that they are measurable. So if it is that you want somebody to do 2 community projects completed by September, tell them so. Because people will come back to you and say, well, I had 2 in mind, but so-and-so was supposed to give me something, and I didn't get that something, so it never happened, and you know, you can't, it's not going to work that way. It really has to be achievable. So you talk to the person. Tell me, how long do you think it would take you to achieve this? Now remember, you can come back to me in a conversation and say, I thought that it was going to be, it was going to work out, but we've had, you know, Liat bumped us in Dominica, we couldn't get out, so we didn't get into, where would you be going, Guadeloupe, to do the presentation, whatever. People are not unreasonable, but it's important that the conversations, remember I told you about communication? Very important that those conversations take place. And SMART is going to be very important for you. It will make it easy. It's worth the torture at the beginning. It will make it easy at the end, because either it was done as agreed, and remember that you're no longer just sending out, we're sitting together. I can have a first run, but we are going to refine together. We are going to agree together. And once we agree together, locked in. All right? Now, I have to say a word about implementation and company culture. It's important, and I understand that a lot of this is happening here during your workshop, that you build consensus around how this is going to work, that you try and get buy-in for it. Is it possible? Is it possible that people could support the initiative, could be excited about it? Here are some of the things that you need if it is going to work. To make resources available, and resources I've already heard you talking about. There's an online portal people can go to. Yes, there'll be lots of support there that people can go to. There'll be instructions on forms. All of those are resources which will help to make the process possible. I find it works to develop a schedule. When we say a deadline, we mean deadline. So if you are supposed to be at a certain stage by a certain time, that is important. When employees are involved in the process too, that helps, because employees will be saying, well, what is going on? It is May, I haven't seen targets. So they will also be helping to drive that process. You're going to have to issue many reminders. Many reminders. Consistency is important. You cannot make up your own balanced scorecard and your own thing as you go along. We agree on how it is going to be done, and that is how it is going to be done. We don't allow people to vary how things are done. Where they have a lot of leeway is in the actual goals and so on. Most important that it's supported from the top. I take it that it is supported from the top here at KFL. It must be championed. Somebody has to be responsible for making sure that this happens. In my organization, it is me, but it is also, we also have strong support for it out of Bermuda and out of Cayman. So even if I were to fall asleep in terms of when things are supposed to happen, I'll get an email or I'll get a phone call. Where are you with your balanced scorecard? What stage are you at? Do you need some support? And I find it really strange and suspicious how those people are always willing to come to Barbados. I can come down and help you. Ongoing training is necessary. Today will not cut it. Tomorrow will not cut it. Because you're going to find that you're going to sit here and everything is going to make sense until you actually have to do the forms. And then you will need perhaps to come back and do a quick, how were those objectives written again? It might just be a 1-hour session. And we do that kind of thing in the organization. We could have as simple as a lunch and learn. Come in, pick up your sandwich, we sit here for half an hour, and we go through again, how do we do the goals? So it's not eating into your day, but quickly you get a refresher on that too. You're going to have to be out there selling the benefits, and I heard some of that already today. It may be a little bit torturous to get going, but once you get going, you're going to find that it makes it easy to manage because there is a clarity around expectations. When you talk to your people and you put those goals in place, people cannot then come back to you and say, but you never made it clear, I didn't understand, because they sat in with you and agreed that this is what was going to be achieved. So it really makes managing quite simple. You don't have to be looking over people's backs. If they have a problem, they let you know, especially if you have a good tool online. Well, I did put here link to reward. We're not sure about that. But be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. You will hit bumps. There will be kinks. What is important is that you go back. That commitment to the process is going to be very important. If you want it to work, it will work. On the other hand, right, the culture is important. And I know that this is a big one for you because this is years of doing things in a particular kind of way. And this is years of, people in the university setting are very important. They have important roles and so on, and people look up to them and so on. So, as I said, those are some of the things that you're going to have to be working with. And you have to be very careful how you handle that because you don't want to turn people off. You want to give everybody the opportunity to be successful, to kind of bring them along. And you're not going to get everybody in one suite. But you will notice that each year it will get better. It will get easier. Eventually, people will be saying to you, where's the balanced scorecard for this year? So the process contributes positively to organizational conversations around what is required, how is it to be achieved, what support is needed, and so on. We noted improvements in ownership for customer service and in our company results as a result of pulling everybody in and focusing them around customer service goals, not just financial, but we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, because we have this service navigation team, it pulls from different people in the organization, and we have customer service standards, which are extremely irritating. Like whenever there is a public holiday, you have to leave a message on your phone that says, it is a public holiday in Barbados, we are closed, blah, 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 blah. I forgot to put on my wants. And the service navigation team made my life so miserable because it was their goal. The people on that goal, on that team, their goal was to make sure that internal service was working and that if people called and I was not available, there was a response on my voicemail. So I had junior people to me leaving a message to say, Mrs. Husbands, we noticed that your voicemail was not left on. Can be irritating, but once you give people responsibility for something, it's part of the scorecard, it's part of their goal, it gets done. So you're going to have some fun moments like that, where you stop and say to yourself, who is this person or why they're telling me this? But remember, the university has some results it's got to get, and all the people in the system have to be part of that getting the results. I'm not going to say much about this because I think I've spoken about it. So I'll just let you read that, internalize it, and we'll move on. You will find that The balanced scorecard, if used well, can give employees a voice because they become very involved in what the organization is trying to achieve and what their part in that. And we find that persons speak up more, they make suggestions, because it comes down to how I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be evaluated. Well, we don't use that word anymore. What's the word we use? Assessed. We use assessed. There will be challenges and surprises. And these are big ones. Beware of the perception of extra work. People do not like filling out forms. Guilty, I hate it. But I recognize that it has to be done. I recognize that once I do it, that chunk of my work. You see, you have to really sell it as part of the work. Because if people think that you have employed them only to teach, explain why they have to do these other things. So somehow, this has to be integrated into their goals. Under people, I suggest under people. You have a people perspective, development, training, development, employee engagement, perfect place. So fellas, you're caught. Has to be done because it's going to be one of your goals. So it's not extra work, it's just some stuff that will make me manage better, will allow me to manage better. I spoke about competence in writing goals, and I need to mention this. Because we're all grown up, and because we are not supposed to let people know what we are feeling inside, we mask things in all kinds of ways, like, me, I don't have any time for that now, that's nonsense. Anybody heard that? Okay, because I've heard that. But if I take that person quietly by the hand and I say to them, well, let me see what progress you're making. A lot of shuffling of papers and nothing is coming out. So then I say, tell you what, let's work on it together. That's where the champion comes in. And I may spend half an hour just going through and reminding that person of some of the fundamentals. And then miraculously, they will actually start the process. Some of our most technical people are the most difficult when it comes to getting them to work with these systems like success factors. Fear is the enemy. Not in this room, of course, but generally. There are positive outcomes to be had. This can be a very valuable process for you. It can help to build relationships. Because what we also found is that where we found people who were strong in this area, we asked them if they would mind giving an hour of their time to meet with 3 or 4 managers to help walk through it. Because what you can achieve one-on-one sometimes is a lot easier than when people feel threatened or they're embarrassed, or remember that fear factor we spoke about? So sometimes I will just say, we have a pool of people who are available and who can meet with you between 3 and 5. I don't need to know about it. Just get in touch with them and arrange a time. So making people feel comfortable with the system and letting them know that people are available to help. It builds the relationship, so it builds the relationship between peers, and it builds the relationship between supervisor and employee, because what happens then, because there's clarity around purpose, I am not being difficult, I am not trying to tell you what to do. We agreed that this is what we would achieve together. I spoke to you about the commitment to service, which we managed to achieve by having everybody on board around customer service, around service navigation team. so that the most junior employees could contribute in that way. That could be part of their goal. And I spoke to our industry position in customer service as a result of everybody being involved. And the last one, you told me not to mention that, but since PVC Downs is in the room, perhaps I should draw his attention to the importance of it.
I just heard it.
But he knows a lot about the theory. He knows how to work it out brilliantly. So all you have to do now is sell it. Thank you very much. I hope that has been useful.
Thank you very much. If I may say so, go on a limb, you know, we are learning this ourselves, and the more you challenge us, the better and we can refine it. Okay?
Hi, looking at our strategic framework, we have 6 perspectives as detailed this morning and 19 strategic themes. Is it at all possible, rather than trying to do a potpourri of all of these all at the same time over the next 5 years, to identify what 1 or 2 perspectives are going to be that we're going to focus on, and a few themes that will be common across all of the units, no matter if it's academic or non-academic or support or outreach. And then we know then the theme for the year, these are the 2 themes that we are working on, and these are the 2 or 3 goals that we are working on, and while we don't ignore the others, that's what the whole culture is going to be around. So if we decide that it's going to be employee engagement for the first year, if we decide on employee engagement and internal operational processes, just picking 2, and we're going to pick 2 themes each from under those 2, and that's what the entire UWI 8,000 employees are going to be focused on, so that by the end of the 5-year period, we've actually gone through all of them, but it did not seem as though we needed to do what, 67? Under 19, under 6, all at the same time, so that we all shut down immediately, because I did. My brain, when I heard 67, said, oh, that's impossible, so next? What's next on my agenda? Because 67 is impossible. However, if we treat it like an elephant and eat it a bite at a time, maybe by 4.5, year 4.5, we look back and say we ate the elephant. Just a thought.
I just want to add to that. But not add, but a different view, right? In the sense that my perception of balance meant that once you pick a set of perspectives, you had to do sufficient in each area in order to get maximum result. No point building up fantastic skills and engagement and then can't apply it in other areas. Right, so that's one of the things that I was considering.
Right. I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that the 6 perspectives are not silos. They're all interconnected. So to work on one in isolation is almost impossible. Okay, but you have a very valid point. We'd get overwhelmed if we tried to do all 67 at once. So what we can do is what I call the space station approach. Okay. When they're putting a space station up in the sky, do they put it all up at once? What do they put the core module up first, okay? But they don't put it up without thinking everything through. Because on the side of that core module, they have all the holes drilled so that when we put the science lab up next year, it bolts right on. Right? And then next year when we have resources, we can put this on and this on and this on. But what they've done is they've thought it all the way through before they put the first piece up. So at least on paper, we can see, because this is like playing like Star Trek, 3-dimensional chess. Because there's so many campuses, so many levels of initiatives, so many different types of projects. And this is not our field. Once you're out of management studies, this is strange territory, right? But we need to think about what we can do, put it on paper, and then we step back and say, what can we handle given our resources, given our time, given our skills, and start scheduling that.
Our last session this afternoon is about communicating the plan. We've been hearing about how important it is to have ongoing communication. So we're not just going to launch the plan and talk about it, but for the 5 years we're going to be doing activities to communicate the plan. And this is our Charleston Lovell and Janet Carew.
Good day, everybody. As Yolanda would have said to you just now, we're Charleston Lovell and Janet Carew, not Charleston and Lovell, or Millie and Vanilli. We know we're standing between you on lunch, so this is going to be very quick.
Very quick.
Because there are 2 of us here, doesn't mean it will take twice as long as has been allocated. One of the reasons why we're here together too is because many people think of communications emanating from the Office of Public Information as just Charleston Lovell Communications Officer. In fact, that has now metamorphosed into something called OSCAR, which you will hear a lot more about in the future. And it stands for Office, as John will show you shortly, it's Office for Student, Corporate, and Alumni Relations. I know you will say you don't see staff anywhere in there. Think of the S as inclusive of staff as well. And whereas we are totally faces in OSCAR, Sonia, who's here, our business development officer, she's also a part of it. So is Dr. Fisher, who's our internationalization officer. And think of OSCAR not as, think of it as the gold figurine behind the Oscars. It's not Oscar, the character who peers it from in the bin in Sesame Street. So it's Oscar the facilitator or the motivator, and not Oscar the germinator. So without much more ado, as I said, because a lot of what I send out comes from the Office of Public Information, and I can tell you from some of the comments that I get from people who say stuff and they hit send, that it isn't always received kindly. In fact, some of the stuff is so, it borders not only obscene, but you can tell that you're annoying people with stuff you send out, which you think they need to know for their benefit, because it's coming off from, from elsewhere, and it's supposed to be corporate or institutional communications, which they ought to know about. But very often people say, well, that doesn't concern me. Why you choke that my mailbox with this? I don't want. I've learned recently that people have gone so far as to create a special box for stuff coming from Office of Public Information, which they just, when it gets filled, they just dump it. And so you think, if you're going to send out something, you just tell people and they would know. But then the kind of questions you get coming at you a week or 2 later, did you get this? No. Did you send it? Oh, well, yes, I did. Oh, I didn't see it. And then when you drill down, oh, it came, but he didn't read it. So we have to find a way to change that. And Oscar, may be one of the ways in which we would seek to do so going forward. Janet will outline to you what we plan to do with regard to the plan, and I will fill in some of the blanks, and answer some of the questions that that are there. But I don't think you can, I don't know whether I will still be communications officer going forward, and whether Janet will still be marketing officer, because there's communications PR, there's marketing PR, then there's business marketing, which Sonia does as well. But it's all, think of it as all one unit that operates seamlessly as opposed to chunks within a broader unit. Hope I haven't confused you too much, Janet.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everyone. The communication plan we're about to share with you is really an overall plan which is done by the University Marketing Office with contribution from all of the campus marketing and PR officers. So we're going to share with you something that we've all basically agreed on, and it is going to be uniformed. And so we've had feedback from Mona, St. Augustine, we've shared it, and this plan is a reflection of what we're hoping to do in the rollout. So first and foremost, it's sharing the vision, and our 2 or 3 speakers really hinged on that, making sure that everyone understands where we're headed with this new strategic plan. And even one of my questions earlier on was about feedback, because you spent 5 years in an organization, and you know that there's something called STRIDE, and it's because there was a booklet hanging around, I knew what STRIDE was, and it really was the strategic plan at the time. And But no feedback came to us, and little to nothing at all was shared with us. And so we want to make sure as we roll out this one, the marketing communications team are able to share with all of our stakeholders. So we want to ensure that all of the staff, they're sufficiently engaged, and engaged in that they're a success factor in the implementation of this plan. Without it is not possible. The strategic objectives that we have is raising stakeholder awareness, engendering pride, goodwill, and ownership, and the relevance of the plan to each stakeholder's core business area. Now, if the groundsman does not understand how this new strategic plan impacts his core area, which is the beautification of the campus, it's difficult for him to buy into the plan. If the clerks at admissions do not understand how they fit into the wider picture, they too do not see why they should bother with understanding the plan. And so basically, we need to raise awareness, but also awareness in that persons understand how they fit into the broader picture. And most of our speakers would have said that persons see it as at the top, it's only the senior managers who are supposed to know about the plan and understand the plan, but more and more we realize the success of it is really has to be everyone, or else it's going to be a failure. The plan is going to be rolled out in stages. The first phase would be internal, so our current student body, current staff, and then later on other stakeholders. We must first understand the plan in order for us to go external. I know that question was asked. Before we can share with the government, who have given us input into the development of the plan, before we can roll it out with them, we need to know what we are into, who we're dealing with, how we're going to manage it. And so we want to make sure that the internal stakeholders are very much aware of the plan. And so the rollout is designed, and like anything else, you put it into nice fancy words. It was in 3 phases: be heard, be informed, and be empowered. And Justin can share with you how it was broken down.
All right, well, there are quite a few things here, but I'll go through something very quickly. The phase for being heard was where you were asked to make input into the actual process that we've arrived at. That was the be heard process. The be informed, a lot of this is being driven out of the VC's office via the overall MRC, Marketing Communications Office out of Trinidad, which reports to the VC. This is the one that our Director of Communications and Marketing, Dawn Marie, heads, and she liaises with us. You know, it's very collaborative, but the messages are fine-tuned. They are sent to us, and we find ways in which, you know, we can target persons specifically where we are at. Traditional and new media. A lot of what I did in the past was traditional, but we've recently done some stuff in new media, Facebook. We're having some signages, new digital signs coming on stream, etc. Janet, you know, will be very instrumental in rolling out, and she will talk a bit more about that. But as I said, there'll be these will be announcements from the VC. The production of full-length plans for distribution upon request, so that people would know, you know, or they can have at a glance where they can see stuff. The development of interactive web presence, condensed updates to be shared in email format, and as I said, sharing copies of the UE vision, mission, and core values overall. But you know, and working towards feature articles, you know, for appearance in the traditional media, in some of our university magazines, Pelican, Stan, Chill, etc. Open letters from the open campus, and developing branded templates, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. So when you see something that talks about the strategic plan, and you get accustomed to seeing that icon or logo, you know what it's related to, and hopefully you won't just hit delete or hit send with a message that is gonna upset someone on the receiving end.
Okay. So, you know, in terms of keeping everybody up to breast has been repeating the message, making sure that everyone is aware of it. And so the branded templates that we have, we're going to ask persons to place it on their signature, their email signature, so that everyone, when you send external messages, one will know there's a new strategic plan. It's also a reminder to you as well. We're hoping to also place signage, flyers, posters, banners on campus in strategic areas that we can share with the students and staff, again, as a constant reminder, and budget permitting as well, because one has to consider that. And using the social media quite a bit to do that, because that's where we're going to cut on the costs. Using Facebook to enlighten our users of Facebook. KVL does not have a Twitter page, but the director's office does have one, and they'll be using this as well. And ensuring that everyone has access to the new strategic plan, sending it on to students, putting it on the students' portal, putting a message on their e-learning site so they could access it that way. So these are the areas, or some of the areas that we're looking at. But we welcome, and we'll be putting this online so you can share with us some information of other areas you think that we can use, or other mediums we can use in sharing this information. 1 second.
The other one that has this.
Okay. Oh. But no, it's right here, sorry. Oh, we wanted to show you the fun things. Last time St. Augustine launched Stride, they used this memorabilia. It was a coffee cup or a teacup, depending if you can pass it around, depending on how you look at it. But basically, it was a constant reminder of what our strategic visions are. Another medium that could be used are pens. Again, reminding costs, but things that persons would use and refer to, but that it's there as a constant reminder to you that this is what our vision are, and this is where we're headed, and this is where we plan to be. And this one is generic, so yes. Yeah. Other mediums in which we're going to use to share the communication tactics, or to share the strategic plan, there will be ongoing the Principals Forum, again, ongoing town hall meetings, sharing giving feedback to the various stakeholders, staff meetings, there'll be progress reports via e-newsletters, and there's also a suggestion for departmental awards, and Professor Downs could maybe share more on that. And again, awarding and recognizing key members of staff who have contributed directly to the development, to the continuation of the strategic plan, or to help get this information out there. And campus strategic planning meeting, which is what we're having here now, workshops and so on, so that it is reiterated to us where we're going and how do we get there. And so there are many mediums that we're going to be using to keep the strategic plan top of mind for everyone.
On the new departmental award, all we can say from our end, because we haven't been really briefed on it as yet, is that it's to be added to the Vice Chancellor's awards, and it should recognize achievement related to the strategic plan, and it's to be emphasized at the next award ceremony, and it will continue throughout the planning period. But as Janet said, Professor Downs may be able to answer any questions that are related to that specifically, whether monetary or otherwise.
Monetary. There you go. Sonia Johnson had been tasked with the Quality Circle. So KVL already has an initiative that can be used to ensure that persons adhere to the standards and the guidelines, the benchmarks that are being set from the May Hines consultancy that was done about 2 years ago. And from that same report that was handed to us, we are going to also ensure that the new mission and vision, it is actually placed in areas that are this high trafficked, so in the faculty office, in various areas where students can see it, stakeholders can see it. So there's over 35 places where the mission and vision will be placed in-house, so that everybody is more aware and familiar with our new mission and vision. So, as Justin was saying, very often, staff say they have no idea what's happening on campus. They didn't know this was happening, and it's only because they're constantly pressing the delete button when they see Office of Public Information. So we say to you to please say to your staff, don't delete these messages. It's very good and material that you can also refer to when you need to, because Justin will send out letters, information, and reference pieces that persons can use in this whole process. It cannot be an initiative that is just top-heavy. heavy. Only the top layer is actually going to do it. The only way we're going to see any success is if there's any drill down to the full body of staff and buy-in by all of them. And so we want to make sure that they're able to do that because they're informed and they understand the process and they know how they fit into the process and they have that buy-in that we're looking for. So really and truly, our last point here, because we know we're standing between you and lunch, is that it really is, it's up to all of us to be able to share that information. It's up to the heads of departments, supervisors and managers, where staff without internet are able to print it and share it with them. We have a great number of staff in security and maintenance who do not have direct access to computers on a daily basis. We implore you to please share it with them so they understand how they fit into the entire strategic plan, or else there'll be little to no buy-in if they're not part of it and don't understand it and only hear of it when they see it in the newspaper that, you know, the university has rolled out a new strategic plan. They feel that they've never been informed. So it's really left up to us to also share it with these members of staff, and also, from my understanding, with temporary lecturers as well. They do not have, or part-time lecturers, they do not have access to our internal mail. And so we need to ensure that it's forwarded on to them so they understand how they fit into this whole process. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you very much. A very good team. Any questions or comments for marketing comms?
One of the issues that keep coming up all the time is that members of staff are not aware of what's going on. We hear that constantly. Surveys tell us that, communication problem, information, and so forth. What I want to get a sense from you as heads primarily is that, do you get a sense that you're not sure about what is going on campus? I mean, is that a general sense that you can say here, or is it other people who are saying this? Because that's the important point. If you are getting it, then you have to find a different way of getting it. Those who are saying that they're not getting it. It could be information overload, but that's come up from the surveys that we've seen, and therefore we need to resolve that problem, because we don't want to be sending you information that is not connected. So I presume everyone is fully connected? No problem?
I think there has been a great improvement in the last 2 years.
Okay, beautiful.
Maybe prior to that.
And the best media also. Which is the best way to get information to you that you feel comfortable with? That's the other issue. Electronic? No delete buttons or spam buttons. Just checking that.
So one more thing I just need to add, just before you go on, I should have mentioned the digital screens. We're going to hope that these are going to be placed all around campus in high traffic areas, and it's going to be, we're going to start off phasing it at 10, and then a few more will come on stream. They'll actually be located in grad studies, the lecture theaters, and so on. And this is also going to be an excellent medium for us to share information with staff, students, I guess just about anybody who walks through campus. We also have a proposal right now to get a large screen placed on campus, a very large one for multi-use, and we're in the discussion stage at the moment. But that would be an excellent way to actually get information out. So we're hoping that, staff are going to read these screens and realize that they're not just for students, but they're for stakeholders, because it's also going to be used for emergency, in case we needed everyone to clear out. We put an emergency message flashing and they ask everyone to clear a particular area.
To add to that, as I said earlier, the Vice Chancellor and myself will be going around, as we did, meeting with the whole carriage of staff again, as we did at the beginning. We're going to do that towards the end of the next academic year, and we will continue that process. Because the reason for that is that, and this is important, the ATS staff, non-academic staff, had complained bitterly that they were not connected to what is going on in the campuses. And when you think about it, ATS staff don't have an avenue other than the union to meet to discuss anything. When you think about it, academic staff can go to department meetings, the faculty meetings, the academic board, and all the other boards. ATS staff, you might have a representative of, but in many respects, the ATS staff consists of a higher percentage of a much higher level than the academic professional staff. So what I'm encouraging you as heads is to involve your non-academic staff members, your ATS members, in whatever decision, whatever issues you're discussing. Even if it's one meeting a year or some sort of meeting involved. It's important to do that. Because in many respects, I've found personally that a lot of things go on and they have to be involved resolving it up front. But we tend to have this divide. I mean, we've had a divide already, and it's unfortunately, I've been at this campus long enough to know it has created problems in the campus over the years, and it's probably still there. And we need, therefore, to resolve that problem. So that's the other part of communication to help the market, because they have to judge how they are communicating, and therefore they have to judge it by virtue of all members of staff. And as I said earlier, the Vice Chancellor myself will be going around, since we are persons dealing with the planning issues, but certainly I would like, certainly new heads especially, from time to time to bring in your secretaries and other whoever they are, and faculty deans, the new deans, to do that from time to time, to bring them involved, even as one special meeting to discuss what is going on in campus, and as Janek and Charleston said, to copy, because some of them don't have access to things, a simple copy, circulate, and that's it. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do, so to break the back of that communication problem.
Yeah, in relation to information overload, especially ATS staff, I think they sometimes feel that they get information which is not totally relevant to them. I've heard some of them say that they have these folders, they send the things to like Chill, for example, which has a lot of stuff which they don't perceive as being relevant to them. And therefore you may have to find new mechanisms for circulating information which they see as relevant to them. Unless we do that, we'll find that a lot of the information that we want to have disseminated to that group is going to be lost in the Ethernet somewhere. And I think marketing has to be creative in this sense now in terms of this strategy, so that they have a document or tool which they can use effectively to get the information they need to work with. Because if you use the traditional channels, they can get lost somewhere there and nobody reads it. Because they do have these strategies they use to deal with the information that we send out now.
Previously, I knew that, like I said, public information gets a lot of requests from what I would call units or subunits within campus who want to target a small number of people, like a department but they want the thing sent to everybody's mailbox. Now, you know, as you spoke of the information overload, you know that will create some kind of ill feeling among people who receive it, who it is a concern. And I used to take it upon myself to be the information gatekeeper, so to speak. I say I'm going to determine, you know, whether this is nice to know or whether this is somebody needs to know this. But then I said, but if people ask me to send it to everybody, maybe I should just send it to everybody. And there's that thin line from time to time of trying to determine, should I run the risk of incurring somebody's wrath of sending this out to everybody and then get half a dozen expletive-ridden responses, you know, why am I receiving this? Or just decide, well, I'm not even going to deal with that, let them find another avenue of targeting or reaching that specific body. But I think something like the strategic plan is of importance to the entire campus, the entire university. So I don't anticipate I don't anticipate that we should get the kind of things replace that we were getting in the past.
I'm assuming that all members of the ATS staff have email addresses, so that if they're already partnering with us, and this is not the temporary people I'm talking about, these are people who are fully on staff, I'm assuming that by now all of them have email addresses, because I see in my office recently we're still printing as an afterthought almost and putting in a folder marked whoever that person is. And if we really want all staff to feel included as part of the UWI, that might be something that we want to look at. Secondly, one of the challenges with the wonderful mail that Office of Public Information sends out is that often it's brochure laden, which is big, with small mailboxes, so that even though I might really want to keep it for further information, I have to press delete after I scan it to see if there's anything in there, and unfortunately then call Jeanette, you sent out something a week ago, what was it, or what particularly vital? Maybe a solution there will be a portal, so that I got the initial message, and even if I have to get rid of it, I can pull the information rather than having to go physically to find one of the two of you.
Well, actually, right now, what we do, we also put the same information on Facebook, because there is information that's relevant to our student body. So events, public lectures, book launches that we think is going to be relevant, that is actually going to be almost like duplicated on Facebook. So that's one other area in which we do it. And depending, sometimes public information sends out smaller versions of it. So if something major is coming up, it will come on its own. It will not be as large. But then at the end of the week, I think it's on a Friday now, then we'll compile something and then it comes out with everything on it. But throughout the week, if something relevant pops up and one is to remind the general staff body, then it is also sent as a further reminder.
But the point you make about the portal, we're working closely with the webmaster who works in Mr. Gill's office, and we try to find ways in which we can do things jointly that will still enable people to have access to the information without clogging their mailboxes up. And that's working out fairly well to date.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the communication plan. Right, well, I want to thank you all for enduring the morning and being so attentive. Today was mostly about information about the balanced scorecard and how we're going to implement it. Tomorrow is going to be a bit more technical, where we'll look at the spreadsheets and so that we're planning to use, and particularly how each department can prioritize their objectives. So we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, 8:30, and we hope again to get out before 1 o'clock tomorrow. So thank you very much again for your participation.